Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Issei was betrayed by everyone and unlocks Sukuna curse powers? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow Negas for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. The battlefield stretched endlessly before him, a wasteland of shattered stone and scorched earth. Issei Hayato, once heralded as the Red Dragon Emperor, knelt amidst the rubble. His armor, once gleaming with the crimson brilliance of the boosted gear, was cracked and smeared with blood. His hands trembled as he clutched at his chest, feeling the void where the sacred power of Drake once resided. He had lost. The battle against Treachery, the legendary beast of destruction, should have been the moment Issei cemented his legacy as a hero. Instead, it had become the stage for his greatest betrayal. The events that led to this moment replayed in his mind like a cruel nightmare. "We can't risk him anymore," Rias had said, her voice cold and resolute. The same voice that had once soothed him in his darkest moments now struck like a blade. "He's reckless," Akino had agreed, her usual teasing smirk replaced with an impassive expression. "We need someone stronger to wield the boosted gear." Issei's world had crumbled in that moment. These were the people he had bled for, fought for, and even died for. Now they stood against him, their words sharper than any weapon. And then, the final blow, his younger brother, Renji, stepping forward with an aura of confidence that Issei had never seen before. "I'll take it from here, brother," Renji had said, his hand outstretched toward the boosted gear. "You've done enough." Drake, the dragon that had been Issei's companion and source of strength, did not argue. The ancient being had remained silent, as though agreeing with their judgment. With a flash of light, the sacred gear that defined Issei's very existence was ripped from him, leaving him hollow. "You've served your purpose, Issei," Surzek's Lucifer had said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Rest now, rest." As if he were some broken tool to be cast aside. Stripped of his power, Issei had been left as little more than a bystander in the battle against Treachery. He had tried to fight, wielding only his determination, but it was not enough. His body had been shattered, his blood painting the battlefield, and as he lay there, dying, he watched Renji's own flesh and blood wield the boosted gear with ease, hailed as a hero by the supernatural factions. The devils, angels, and fallen angels who had once cheered for Issei now turned their adoration toward his brother. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered on his tongue as his vision dimmed, as his consciousness ebbed, memories of his past surfaced unbidden. He saw himself as a child, scorned and ridiculed by his peers. The boy who was labeled a pervert, who hid his pain behind a mask of bravado. He saw the nights he spent training alone, pushing his body and mind to their limits to prove his worth. He remembered the day Rias had saved him, offering him a new life as a devil. He had thought it was his chance to finally belong, to be more than just a loser. But now he realized it had all been a lie. "You were never meant to rise, Issei," a voice whispered in his mind, dark and venomous. "You were a pawn. Nothing more." Tears streamed down his face as the weight of his failures bore down on him. The people he had trusted had abandoned him. The world he had fought to protect had discarded him. And yet, amidst the pain and despair, a single thought burned brightly in his mind. Why? Why me? Why did they do this to me? As his body grew cold and his vision faded, a presence stirred in the void. It was ancient, malevolent, and overwhelmingly powerful. "You've been cast aside, haven't you?" the voice said, dripping with malice. "Betrayed by those you loved. Forgotten by the world you fought to protect." Issei's lips moved, but no sound came out. "But you're not finished, are you?" the voice continued, a sinister edge to its tone. "You don't want to die here, not like this. You want revenge." The word reverberated in his mind, revenge. It was like a spark in the darkness, igniting a fire deep within him. "Who are you?" Issei managed to whisper. The voice chuckled, low and menacing. "I am Sukuna, the king of curses. And you, boy, are a vessel worth saving." 3. A surge of dark energy enveloped Issei, filling the emptiness left by the boosted gear. His broken body began to mend, his wounds sealing as if they had never existed. The markings of Sukuna, black and jagged, etched themselves into his skin, radiating a cursed energy that made the very air around him tremble. For the first time in his life, Issei felt truly alive. As Issei opened his eyes, the crimson glow of Sukuna's curse replaced the light that had once marked the boosted gear's power. He pushed himself to his feet, the ground cracking beneath him as his newfound strength surged through his veins. "I will make them pay," he said, his voice steady and cold. "Every single one of them." The king of curses laughed within his mind, a sound of pure satisfaction. "Good. Let us begin." And with that, Issei Hayadao, fallen king, took his first step toward revenge. The night was still, the air heavy with the silence of a world that had turned its back on Issei Hayadu. His body lay on the cold, jagged ground, bloodied and lifeless, a testament to the cruelty he had endured. Yet, in the void between life and death, his soul stirred, caught in a tempest of anger, betrayal, and despair. "Is this it?" he thought bitterly. "After everything, after all the sacrifices, I die as nothing, forgotten." The void around him pulsed with an ominous energy, and then, the darkness began to shift. "You cling to life, even now," a voice boomed, deep and malevolent. Issei's mind snapped to attention. The voice reverberated through the emptiness, its power undeniable. It felt ancient, as if it had existed long before the world he knew. Who are you?" Issei's voice was hoarse, weak. "I am Sukuna," the voice replied, each syllable dripping with dark intent. "The king of curses. And you, boy, are a fitting vessel for my power." The name sent a shiver down Issei's spine. Sukuna was a name whispered in fear even among the supernatural factions. A cursed spirit so powerful that gods themselves had once united to seal him away. "Why me?" Issei asked, his voice trembling. "I'm nothing. Just a failure." "Failure?" Sukuna's laughter was cruel and mocking. "You were betrayed because they feared what you could become. The boosted gear? A mere tool for them to manipulate. But I see the truth. Your rage, your pain, they are the seeds of greatness. All you lack is the power to make them pay." Issei's memories flashed before him, Rias turning her back on him, Akino's cold agreement, Renji stealing the boosted gear, and the supernatural factions condemning him to death. The sting of betrayal burned deep in his chest, fueling a rage he had never felt before. "What do you want from me?" Issei asked, his fists clenching in the void. Sukuna's voice grew softer, almost coaxing. "Your body, your soul, your will. Become my host, and I will give you the strength to crush those who wronged you. To rise above gods and devils alike. Together, we will show them the price of betrayal." Issei hesitated, the weight of the offer pressing down on him. Yet, as he thought of the faces of those who had betrayed him, the decision became clear. "Do it," he said, his voice steady now. "Give me the power. I'll make them suffer." Sukuna's laughter echoed through the void, filled with dark satisfaction. "Then let us begin." A torrent of black energy surged toward Issei, engulfing him in its relentless flow. His body, broken and lifeless, began to move, jerking as if pulled by unseen strings. Pain ripped through him, sharp and searing, as the curse began to take root. Black markings spread across his skin, jagged and alive, radiating with cursed energy. His muscles mended, stronger than ever before. His heart, once fragile and hesitant, now beat with the fury of a war drum. Issei screamed, his voice echoing across the void, as the transformation completed. When he opened his eyes, they glowed with a crimson light, filled with the malevolence of Sukuna's curse. The battlefield reappeared around him, its silence broken by the faint crackle of dying flames. The bodies of fallen soldiers and shattered remnants of supernatural power lay scattered across the ground. Issei staggered to his feet, his breath heavy but controlled. He looked down at his hands, now coursing with cursed energy that pulsed like a living thing. "So, this is what it feels like," he murmured, flexing his fingers as black tendrils of energy coiled around them. Sukuna's voice echoed in his mind. "You are no longer the boy they discarded. You are my vessel. My weapon." And their worst nightmare. A dark grin spread across Issei's face. For the first time, he felt free, unbound by the expectations of others, unshackled by their judgments. "They'll regret it," he said, his voice cold and resolute. "Every single one of them will pay." The cursed energy within him burned with a relentless hunger, pushing him forward. Images of Rias, Akino, Renji, and the supernatural leaders flashed before his eyes. He could see their smug faces, their laughter at his downfall. Sukuna's power amplified his rage, his thirst for revenge. Your strength will grow, but only if you embrace the curse fully. There is no room for weakness in vengeance, Issei nodded. Weakness had no place in his new life. With newfound purpose, he turned toward the horizon. The supernatural world had declared him unworthy, cast him aside like a broken tool. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had left him alive. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the sprawling supernatural city of Kuo. Issei Hayate watched from the shadows, his crimson eyes glinting with malice as he observed the festivities below. The supernatural factions had gathered in unison, a rare sight in their history. Devils, angels, fallen angels, and even a few gods mingled, their laughter and cheers echoing through the air. At the center of it all was Renji Hayate, his younger brother, the self-proclaimed hero of the Trihexa War. Renji stood tall on a raised platform, adorned in ceremonial robes that gleamed under the moonlight. His face was calm, composed, the very image of a savior. Around his wrist, the boosted gear shimmered, its crimson light a painful reminder of what had been stolen. To Renji Hayate, Sirzex Lucifer raised a goblet, his voice carrying across the crowd. The savior of the supernatural world and the one who ended the Trihexa threat. The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices blending into a cacophony of celebration. Issei clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The sight of Renji basking in their adoration made his blood boil. They celebrate a thief, Sukuna's voice hissed in his mind. A pretender. He wears your power like a trophy, parading it before those who betrayed you. 3. Issei's lips curled into a snarl. They'll pay for this. All of them. Issei's gaze shifted to the prominent figures scattered throughout the crowd. Rias Gremory stood with her peerage, her beauty radiant as always, but her demeanor was different, hardened, distant. Issei remembered the warmth in her smile when she first brought him into her world. Now, that smile was reserved for Renji. Akino Himejima stood beside her, her usual sultry grace on full display. But Issei could see the cold calculation in her eyes as she toasted Renji. She had always been pragmatic, but her betrayal cut deeper than most. Azazel, the former governor of the fallen angels, leaned casually against the pillar, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. He had been a mentor to Issei, a figure of wisdom and guidance. Yet when it mattered most, he had stayed silent, complicit in Issei's downfall. They threw you away to protect their fragile hierarchy, Sukuna growled. They feared your strength, your potential. Now they celebrate the very weakness they sought to replace you with. Issei's anger simmered, his cursed energy stirring around him like a living thing. The markings on his arms pulsed with dark light, visible even beneath his clothes. Renji raised his hands, silencing the crowd. The air grew still as all eyes turned to him. I am honored to stand before you tonight, Renji began, his voice steady and confident. Together, we have overcome one of the greatest threats our world has ever faced. But this victory was not mine alone. It was a collective effort, a testament to the unity of our factions. The crowd erupted into applause, their admiration palpable. Issei's jaw tightened. Renji's words were laced with humility, but Issei knew better. He could see the arrogance beneath the surface, the satisfaction in his brother's eyes. You owe him nothing, Sukuna whispered. Take back what was stolen. As the celebration continued, Issei retreated into the shadows, his mind churning with thoughts of revenge. He had no allies, no resources, but he had something far more valuable, the power of Sukuna. The first step is understanding your enemies, Sukuna said. Learn their weaknesses. Exploit their fears. Strike when they least expect it. Issei nodded. The supernatural factions had grown complacent in their victory, blind to the storm brewing in the darkness. 6. Before leaving, Issei decided to leave a mark, a reminder that he was not gone. As the celebration reached its peak, a pulse of cursed energy surged through the air, crackling with malevolent intent. The lights flickered, and a chill swept through the crowd. For a brief moment, the shadows seemed to move, twisting and coiling like living creatures. Renji's eyes narrowed as he scanned the darkness, his hand instinctively moving to the boosted gear. In the distance, Issei's voice echoed, low and menacing. Enjoy your moment, Renji. It won't last. The cursed energy dissipated, leaving the crowd in uneasy silence. Whispers spread like wildfire, the celebratory atmosphere tainted with a sense of dread. As Issei disappeared into the night, he felt a grim satisfaction. They would remember him, not as the fool they discarded, but as the storm that would tear their world apart. You've taken the first step, Sukuna said, his voice filled with approval. But this is only the beginning. Issei's crimson eyes glinted in the darkness. They think they've won. But they've forgotten one thing. And what's that? Sukuna asked. Issei's grin was cold, devoid of mercy. I'm still here. The night was endless, the chill biting as Issei wandered through the desolate outskirts of Kuo. The festivities in the city had long faded into the distance, replaced by the quiet hum of the wilderness. Despite his newfound power, a storm raged within him, a maelstrom of anger, betrayal, and despair. He found himself standing before a ruined shrine, its once pristine structure now a shadow of its former glory. The air was thick with a sense of abandonment, and Issei felt an eerie kinship with the forgotten place. This is what they reduced you to, Sukuna's voice echoed in his mind. A relic, discarded and left to rot. Issei clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms as memories came rushing back, each one a blade cutting deeper into his already fractured soul. He saw himself standing in his family's small kitchen, a younger Issei eagerly clutching his report card. His grades were better than ever, and he'd worked tirelessly to earn praise from his parents. But his mother's voice was dismissive. That's good, Renji got straight A's again. You should ask him for tips. His father's nod was absent. Try harder next time, Issei. The scene shifted to school. Issei sat at the back of the class, ignored by his classmates. The occasional jeer of pervert or loser echoed in his ears, but he had learned to tune it out. Even then, he clung to hope that one day, things would change. And then came the betrayal by the supernatural world. Issei remembered the council of leaders, Surzex, Azazel, Michael, and other prominent figures, standing in judgment over him. You've grown too reckless, Issei, Surzex had said, his tone cold and unyielding. Your actions put the balance of power at risk. You're a liability, added Azazel, his eyes sharp. You've lost control of your powers too many times. The boosted gear is wasted on someone like you. Renji is a better candidate, Michael declared. He has the discipline and the faith that you lack. 2. The boosted gear had been ripped from him, its warmth and power stolen away. He remembered the smirk on Renji's face as he slipped the sacred artifact onto his arm. Don't take it personally, big bro, Renji had said with feigned sympathy. This is just how things have to be. And then Rias, the one person he thought would stand by him. She had lowered her gaze, refusing to meet his eyes. Rias, he had pleaded. Say something. Please, but she had only whispered, I'm sorry, Issei. It's for the greater good. Those words replayed in his mind like a broken record. Sukuna's voice broke through the memories. Their betrayal fuels you. Let it strengthen you. Pain is the greatest teacher, and yours is a master class. The cursed energy within Issei surged, responding to his anguish. The markings on his arms glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. I trusted them, Issei said, his voice low and trembling. I gave everything, and they threw me away like garbage. Trust is a weakness, Sukuna replied. Those who rely on others are doomed to fall. But you, my vessel, will rise alone, stronger than any who dared betray you. Issei nodded slowly, his resolve hardening. The pain in his chest did not subside, but he embraced it, letting it fuel the fire of his vengeance. Issei wandered deeper into the shrine, his footsteps echoing against the cracked stone floor. At its center lay an old, shattered statue of a forgotten god. Its features were eroded, its once proud visage now a ruin. He knelt before it, his crimson eyes fixed on the hollow sockets where its eyes had once been. You were abandoned too, he muttered. Left to crumble while they moved on. I know that feeling all too well. The cursed energy around him flared, and for a moment, the statue seemed to pulse with life. Issei placed a hand on its cold surface, his lips curling into a grim smile. They'll remember us, he said. Not as the ones they discarded, but as the ones who rose from the ashes to destroy them. As dawn approached, Issei stood before the shrine, the first rays of sunlight piercing through the cracks in the walls. The light illuminated his figure, but the darkness within him remained untouched. He raised his hand, watching the cursed energy dance across his fingers. It was wild, untamed, but it felt like a part of him now, a part he would never relinquish. "I'll make them regret it," he said, his voice resolute. "Every single one of them will pay for what they did." Sukuna's laughter echoed in his mind, filled with approval. "Good. Let the world tremble before us, Issei Haidu. The king of curses rises." With those words, Issei turned and walked away from the shrine, his crimson eyes fixed on the horizon. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but one thing was clear: he would no longer be a pawn in anyone's game. The wilderness offered solitude, but Issei no longer sought peace. The days of yearning for understanding or camaraderie were dead, buried under the weight of betrayal. The whispers of Sukuna echoed through his mind, each word a reminder of the truth Issei had long refused to see. Humans, devils, angels, it doesn't matter. They're all parasites, leeching off those who dare to stand above them. You were their tool. Now you'll be their executioner. Issei smirked, the cruel logic resonating deep within him. Compassion, forgiveness, those were chains meant to bind the weak. He would wield his newfound power not for justice, but for retribution. The clearing where Issei stood radiated with his cursed energy. Dark tendrils of power seeped into the earth, corrupting the once verdant land. The markings on his body glowed ominously as he focused, molding his energy into a swirling sphere of destruction. He thrust his hand forward, releasing the attack. The orb streaked across the clearing, colliding with a boulder and reducing it to dust. The sheer force of the explosion echoed through the forest, scattering birds and wildlife. "Impressive," Sukuna remarked. "But destruction is meaningless unless it serves a purpose." Issei's eyes narrowed. "Then I'll give it one. They destroyed me. I'll return the favor." Later that night, Issei ventured into a small human village on the outskirts of the forest. The settlement was quiet, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the monster that had emerged from the shadows. He walked through the streets, his presence unnoticed by the humans around him. Sukuna's voice guided him, urging him forward. "These people don't matter. They'll bow to the strong or perish beneath your heel. Choose one." Issei stopped in the center of the village square, his crimson eyes scanning the crowd. A young man selling bread caught his attention, his cheerful demeanor grating against Issei's patience. Without a word, Issei raised his hand. A surge of cursed energy erupted from his palm, striking the vendor and incinerating him on the spot. Screams filled the air as the villagers fled, their terror feeding Issei's satisfaction. "They'll learn," he said coldly. "This world doesn't belong to the weak." As the night deepened, Issei returned to his makeshift camp. He stared into the fire, his thoughts sharper, more defined. "The supernatural factions see themselves as rulers," he muttered. "But they're no better than these humans, weak, pathetic, clinging to their illusions of control." "And you?" Sukuna asked, his voice dripping with amusement. "What will you become?" Issei's smirk was feral. "A god. Not of mercy, but of fear." The cursed energy within him surged, responding to his declaration. He no longer cared for the humans or their petty struggles. They were tools at best, obstacles at worst. His only goal now was power, unquestionable, unchallenged power. The next day, Issei sensed a presence approaching his camp. He turned to see a figure stepping out of the shadows, a devil scout, sent to confirm the rumors of his survival. "Issei Haidu," the devil said, his voice trembling. You're alive?" Issei tilted his head, his crimson eyes glowing faintly. "Alive? No. I'm something far worse." The scout barely had time to react before Issei's cursed energy enveloped him. The air grew thick with malice as the devil was crushed beneath the weight of Issei's power, his screams echoing through the forest. Issei watched dispassionately as the life drained from the scout's eyes. "Let that be a message to the rest of them," he said, his voice cold and unfeeling. "The king they cast aside has returned." As night fell once more, Issei stood atop a hill overlooking the forest. The moonlight bathed him in an ethereal glow, but the darkness within him was absolute. Sukuna's laughter echoed in his mind. You're finally learning. Mercy is a lie, and love is weakness. You'll burn their world to ashes, and from those ashes you'll build your throne, too. Issei nodded, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Let them tremble. Let them beg. I'll show them what true power looks like. The cursed energy around him flared, illuminating the night with a sinister glow. Issei Hayato was no longer bound by the ideals of humanity or morality. He was a force of destruction, unyielding and unstoppable. Issei's reputation as a remorseless force of destruction spread quickly. To the supernatural factions, he was a nightmare reborn, a specter of their collective guilt. To others, those who harbored hatred for the world that betrayed them, he was a beacon, a harbinger of retribution. But Issei did not seek followers. He cared not for loyalty or companionship. Those who approached him were tools, extensions of his will, bound by shared disdain for the fragile worlds of humans and supernatural alike. Mercy had no place in their path. 2. Athena arrived first, her once pristine armor tarnished, her gaze burning with rage. She was no longer the revered goddess of wisdom and strategy. She was a warrior cast out by her pantheon, betrayed for questioning their hypocrisy. She found Issei atop a hill, surrounded by the remnants of a human village he had obliterated. The stench of ash and death filled the air, and the ground was stained with blood. You did this, she said, her voice low but steady. Issei didn't turn. And if I did? A twisted smile curved her lips. Then you and I may have more in common than I thought. He glanced at her, his crimson eyes narrowing. State your purpose, goddess. I don't have time for idle conversation. I was betrayed by those I once called kin, she replied. And I've grown tired of playing the protector. I want revenge, and I want to see their kingdoms burn. Issei smirked. If you're looking for mercy, you won't find it here. Good, Athena said, stepping closer. Mercy is for the weak. Artemis's arrival was heralded by the sound of arrows slicing through the air. Issei turned to see a group of supernatural hunters, foolish enough to track him, collapse in a spray of blood. Artemis stepped out of the shadows, her silver bow glinting in the moonlight. These insects thought they could kill you, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Issei tilted his head. And you decided to do my work for me? She shrugged. It amused me. Besides, I've grown tired of protecting mortals who would sooner spit on me than thank me. Then why are you here? To hunt something worth killing, Artemis replied, her silver eyes meeting his. You're carving a path of destruction. I want in. Do you think you have what it takes to walk this path? Her laugh was dark, almost predatory. Try me. Sona Citri approached Issei with an offer. She had been betrayed by the devil she once served, her brilliance used and discarded. The woman who stood before Issei now was a far cry from the noble heiress she once was. 2. I've studied your actions, she said, her tone clipped and precise. Your methods are effective but lack refinement. With my strategies, we can annihilate the supernatural factions entirely. Issei regarded her with a cold smirk. And what's in it for you? Revenge, Sona said simply. I want to see them suffer. All of them. And the humans? She scoffed. They're no better. I won't lose sleep over their destruction. Issei extended his hand. Then prove your worth, and I'll let you stay. Her lips curled into a vicious smile. You won't regret it. Amaterasu descended upon Issei's camp like a burning star. Her once golden light had dimmed, replaced by a fiery aura of destruction. She had been cast out by her fellow gods, her kindness repaid with betrayal. 3. I've heard of your deeds, she said, her voice carrying an edge of fury. You leave only ashes in your wake, and? Issei asked, unimpressed. I want to see the world burn, she said, her golden eyes blazing. Mortals, gods, devils, they all deserve to be consumed by the flames. Issei studied her for a moment before nodding. Then join me. But know this, there will be no salvation. No second chances. Amaterasu smiled, her expression almost feral. Good. I'm done with salvation. As the 4 women stood before him, Issei felt no sense of camaraderie or affection. These were not allies. They were tools, sharp, deadly instruments of his vengeance. And they understood that. You've chosen to stand with me, Issei said, his voice cold and commanding. But know this, I care nothing for your lives. You are here to serve my will, and my will alone. The women nodded, their eyes reflecting their shared malice. Good, Issei continued. Together, we will tear down the worlds of men and gods alike. We will leave nothing but ash in our wake. His cursed energy flared, a maelstrom of darkness that seemed to devour the light around them. The women stood unfazed, their own powers radiating with destructive intent. They were no longer bound by morality or compassion. They were forces of annihilation, and their crusade had just begun. The news spread quickly. Issei Haidu, once a fallen king, now returned with a dark vengeance that shook the very foundations of the supernatural world. His rise was swift and unstoppable. To those who had once wronged him, it was too late. To those who had abandoned him, there would be no mercy. Issei stood tall at the forefront of his new army, the remnants of fallen gods, demons, and warriors. His crimson eyes glowed with an intensity that matched the fires of the war raging around them. He had gathered his forces, yes, but they were nothing more than tools to him, just like everything else in this broken world. He had no interest in alliances. No desire for camaraderie. Everyone around him, from his powerful allies to the broken remnants of his enemies, existed solely to serve his one purpose: vengeance. Issei watched as Athena, Artemis, Sona, and Amaterasu tore through enemy lines, each delivering brutal, precise strikes that left nothing but devastation in their wake. The harem, as the others had called them, had been drawn to him by their own pain and desperation, but Issei had no illusions about their role. They were useful to him, nothing more. Their loyalty, if it could even be called that, was based on their own desire for power, not out of any affection for him. And that was exactly how he preferred it. Each one of them is just a stepping stone, Issei muttered to himself, his voice dripping with disdain. He surveyed the carnage with a cold smile, watching as his allies brought their enemies to their knees. Athena's strength, Artemis's precision, Sona's intellect, and Amaterasu's fire, all of them are tools. Nothing more. The thought didn't bother him. In fact, it pleased him. He would never again be the fool who believed in the bonds of friendship or loyalty. These beings, whether gods or mortals, were merely pieces on a chessboard, and Issei had always been an expert player. The supernatural factions were crumbling beneath Issei's assault, their leaders either dead or hiding in fear. Once proud and untouchable, they were now reduced to nothing more than frightened remnants clinging to whatever power they had left. The gods had underestimated him, the devils had betrayed him, and now they were all paying the price. As he walked through the battlefield, his steps echoing ominously, Issei's eyes narrowed. He had already given his enemies one warning: their time was running out. Now, he would show them what true power looked like. The world itself would be reshaped by his hands. Everyone who had ever crossed him would fall, and his reign would be absolute. "You're all tools, just like them," Issei said aloud, gesturing toward his harem, who stood behind him. They had already learned their place in his world, their loyalty bought with the promise of power and destruction. He cared little for their personal struggles or motivations. The only thing that mattered to him was their utility. They would follow him, or they would perish. Issei glanced at Sona, who stood apart from the others, her calculating eyes scanning the remnants of the battlefield. The strategist was valuable, no doubt, but her role in his rise to power would end once she had served her purpose. "Sona," Issei called out, his voice cold and detached. "What's the situation?" Sona snapped to attention, her face expressionless. "We've decimated their forces. There are a few pockets of resistance, but they're disorganized and lacking leadership. If we push further, we'll break their morale completely." "Good. Continue," Issei commanded. He didn't need to know the details, not really. He was already moving on to the next phase in his mind. His eyes shifted to Amaterasu, whose fiery power had left a path of destruction across the land. The sun goddess had been a potent asset, but she was still just a tool. He didn't look at her with gratitude or admiration. He didn't care about her strength, or her past. She was strong enough to serve him now, and that was all that mattered. When her usefulness expired, she would be discarded without hesitation. For, despite the tactical brilliance of his harem, despite their power, Issei knew they were dispensable. He didn't need friends. He didn't need allies. His power was more than enough to crush any remaining opposition, and once he had secured his position, he would be free to do as he pleased. The loyalty of his companions was of no concern to him. Their usefulness was all that mattered. 2. Athena, Artemis, Sona, and Amaterasu were driven by their own desires for vengeance, power, or redemption. Issei, on the other hand, was driven by something much darker, an insatiable hunger to make the world regret its treatment of him. They could serve his purpose, but once that was accomplished, they would be discarded without remorse. Once we're done here, Issei murmured, his gaze darkening, the world will be reshaped by my hand. I'll leave nothing but ashes in my wake. This world had abandoned him when he was at his weakest. Now, it would pay the price for its betrayal. Issei's eyes turned to his tools once more. They were tools. But even tools had their uses. They had served him well so far, and now he would use them to consolidate his power. They were necessary for what was to come, but they would learn, as all tools did, that they could be replaced. Destroy everything, Issei commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. Leave nothing behind. The destruction was swift, relentless, and absolute. The air reeked of burnt flesh and ash, the remnants of another annihilated faction. Issei stood amidst the ruins, his crimson eyes surveying the desolation. To him, it wasn't just another victory. It was a step closer to fulfilling his vengeance. Yet, there was no satisfaction in the screams of the dying or the destruction he left behind. For Issei, the supernatural and human worlds were nothing more than tools and obstacles. Monkeys, he muttered under his breath. Watching a group of human survivors scramble to escape the battlefield. Pathetic creatures clinging to their meaningless existence. They'll bow, serve, or perish. It's all the same to me. 3. Behind him. Artemis approached, her bow still dripping with the blood of her enemies. The last of Belial's forces have been eradicated, she reported. Issei didn't turn to face her. His attention was focused on a human child who had stumbled over debris, crying for help. With a flick of his hand, cursed energy surged forth, obliterating the child without a second thought. Let them be a lesson, he said coldly, to any who think they can stand in my way. No matter how small or insignificant. Issei's allies gathered before him, their expressions varying from stoic to eager. The ruins of Belial's stronghold lay behind them, the spoils of their conquest scattered at their feet. Sona stepped forward, a scroll in her hand. These are the names of those who actively conspired in your betrayal, my lord. Devils, angels, fallen angels, and even humans who sought to curry favor with your enemies. Issei took the scroll, his lips curling into a cruel smile as he scanned the list. Rius Gremry, Serzex Lucifer, Michael, Azazel, and humans too. How predictable, always scrambling for power in a world that doesn't belong to them. He threw the scroll aside, the list already seared into his memory. They'll all burn. Every last one of them. Athena stepped forward, her piercing gaze meeting his. And the humans, my lord? Many of them merely followed orders, hoping to survive. Humans are nothing but vermin, Issei said, his voice devoid of emotion. Their survival doesn't concern me. They exist to serve or to be consumed by their betters. Any who oppose us will die. Those who don't will live long enough to see their chains. Issei turned his attention to his so-called allies. To him, they weren't friends or confidants. They were tools efficient and obedient, but tools nonetheless. 2. Sona, he commanded. I want the underworld infiltrated. Their defenses must be laid bare before our next strike. As you command, Sona replied, her tone measured but her eyes betraying a flicker of uncase. Athena, your task is heaven. Michael and his angels think themselves untouchable, but I want their sanctuaries desecrated. It will be done, Athena said, bowing her head. Artemis, Amaterasu, he said, turning to the two goddesses. Grigori is your next target. Leave nothing standing. No mercy. No survivors. I want Azazel's head on a pike. The huntress and the sun goddess exchanged glances before nodding. As you wish, my king, Artemis said, her voice steady. As his allies departed to carry out his orders, Issei gazed out over the horizon. The human cities in the distance were nothing more than a blur of lights, their inhabitants blissfully unaware of the chaos that awaited them. How insignificant they are, he murmured, scrabbling in the dirt for scraps of power. They call themselves advanced, yet they are no different from the apes they evolved from. A shadow shifted beside him, revealing Amaterasu. You despise them, she said, her tone neutral. Despise? Issei chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. No. That would imply they're worth my hate. They're insects, nothing more. Useful as fodder, amusing when they beg, and delicious when they bleed. They mean nothing to me. Amaterasu inclined her head, her golden eyes flickering with approval. Then we are of one mind, my king. The world you're building has no place for weakness. Belial, a devil lord who had publicly mocked Issei's humanity, was the first to pay the price. His stronghold fell within hours, his forces unable to withstand the onslaught of Issei's army. When Issei finally confronted him, the devil lord was on his knees, bloodied and beaten. You called me weak, Issei said, his voice low and venomous. You mocked my humanity, as though it were a flaw. Now look at you, pathetic. Belial coughed, blood staining his lips. You've become a monster, Issei. This isn't strength, this is madness. Too, perhaps, Issei replied, crouching to meet his gaze. But madness is what your betrayal forged. He reached out, his hand enveloped in cursed energy, and crushed Belial's skull. The Devil Lord's screams echoed across the battlefield, a chilling reminder of Issei's wrath. The supernatural factions were retreating, their forces scattered and their leaders in hiding. But Issei wasn't satisfied. He wanted more than their destruction, he wanted to break them. Prepare for the next strike, he commanded. No rest until the underworld, heaven, and Grigori lie in ruins. Humanity will kneel or die. The world will burn, and I will reign over its ashes. As his allies dispersed, Issei allowed himself a moment of reflection. His enemies had called him a monster, a demon, a curse. And perhaps they were right. But it didn't matter. Humanity, the supernatural, they're all the same, he said to himself. Tools, pray. Or obstacles. And I will crush them all. With that, he rose from his throne of shattered relics, his crimson aura flaring like wildfire. The world had turned its back on him, and now it would pay the price. The battlefield lay quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded mere hours earlier. The sky was smeared with the dull gray of smoke, and the air hung heavy with the stench of charred flesh and blood. Issei stood at the center, surveying the aftermath. His crimson eyes were cold and unfeeling, the faint smirk on his lips betraying his satisfaction. Behind him, Athena approached, her footsteps soft yet deliberate. Unlike the others, she exuded an aura of quiet strength, unyielding and resolute. Another victory, she said, her voice calm but edged with determination. Issei didn't respond immediately, his attention fixed on a shattered statue of a celestial being, a relic of heaven's dominion. His lips curled into a sneer. Victory is a trivial term, Athena. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about annihilation. The complete erasure of those who dared to cross me. Athena's gaze followed his, lingering on the destroyed remnants of divine power. And yet, victory is the foundation of annihilation, my king. She turned her sharp eyes to him. You've made it clear where your path leads, but what of those who follow you? Do you see them as anything more than weapons in your arsenal? Issei turned to face her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he simply studied her, as if weighing her worth. You speak of loyalty, he said, his tone measured. But loyalty is a fleeting thing. People swear allegiance until it no longer serves them. That's why I don't care for trust or camaraderie. All of you, Athena, Artemis, Sona, Amaterasu, you're tools. Useful, efficient, but tools nonetheless. Athena didn't flinch at his words. If anything, her resolve seemed to harden. If that's how you see us, so be it. Tools or not, I've made my choice. I stand with you, not because of loyalty or obligation, but because your vision aligns with mine. The gods of old, the factions, they're relics of a broken system. You seek to replace it, and I will see that vision realized. Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a declaration. For the first time in what felt like centuries, Issei felt a flicker of something other than rage. You're bold, Athena, he said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. but words mean nothing. Prove your worth to me in action, and perhaps I'll reconsider your value. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden surge of energy. A divine barrier shimmered into existence in the distance, and within seconds, a legion of angels descended, their radiant forms illuminating the battlefield. At their forefront was Gabriel, her beauty ethereal but her expression grim. Issei Hayadu, she called out, her voice carrying an authority that echoed across the ruined land. Your reign of terror ends here. Issei's smirk widened, his cursed energy flaring around him like a dark inferno. Another lamb to the slaughter. How predictable! Before he could step forward, Athena raised a hand, stopping him. Allow me, my king, she said, stepping ahead. He arched a brow. You wish to fight Gabriel alone? Consider it my trial, Athena replied, her voice steady. A chance to prove my worth beyond being a mere tool. Athena and Gabriel faced off, their opposing energies crackling in the air. The angels behind Gabriel hesitated, their resolve faltering at the sight of the war goddess. You've chosen poorly, Athena, Gabriel said, her tone laced with disappointment. To ally yourself with this abomination. You were once a protector, a beacon of wisdom. Now you're nothing but a shadow. Athena's lips curled into a smirk. A protector? A beacon? Those titles are meaningless in a world built on lies and betrayal. Wisdom lies in embracing reality, Gabriel, and reality is that Issei Hayadu will shape this world into something far greater than your outdated ideals. Without another word, Athena launched herself forward, her spear shimmering with divine energy. Gabriel met her heat-in, their clash shaking the very ground beneath them. The battle raged on, a spectacle of divine and cursed power. Athena fought with precision and strategy, her every move calculated to exploit Gabriel's weaknesses. You've lost your way, Athena! Gabriel cried, her wings battered but her resolve unshaken. There's still a chance for redemption. Redemption? Athena laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. From whom? You. The hypocritical angels who turned a blind eye to injustice? The gods who abandoned their own creations. There's no redemption for this world, Gabriel, only destruction and rebirth. With a final, devastating blow, Athena's spear pierced Gabriel's chest, shattering her divine barrier. The archangel fell to her knees, blood staining her pristine robes. As the angels scattered, Issei approached, his expression one of mild amusement. You've done well, he said, his gaze flickering to Gabriel's broken form. Perhaps you're more than just a tool after all. Athena pulled her spear free, her breathing steady despite the intensity of the battle. I serve because I believe in your vision, not because I seek your approval, my king. Issei chuckled, his crimson eyes gleaming. Careful, Athena. That defiance might almost make me respect you. With Gabriel defeated and the angels retreating, Issei turned his attention back to the human cities visible in the distance. They'll come for us again, Athena said, standing by his side. The factions, the gods, the remnants of humanity. They won't stop until you're destroyed. Let them come, Issei replied, his voice a dark whisper. Their resistance only makes their despair sweeter. Humans, angels, devils, they're all the same. Weak, foolish, and expendable. He extended a hand, dark energy pooling in his palm. In the blink of an eye, the distant city was consumed by a black inferno, its lights snuffed out as though they had never existed. The world will burn, he said, his voice dripping with malice. And from its ashes, I will create something worthy of my rule. As the flames consumed the horizon, Athena bowed her head slightly, a glimmer of respect in her eyes. For better or worse, she had chosen her king, and the world would never be the same. The night after Gabriel's defeat was eerily silent. The battlefield, once alight with divine and cursed energies, now stood as a graveyard of ash and bone. Issei sat on a throne made of broken celestial relics, his crimson eyes gleaming in the dim light of the crescent moon. His allies stood at varying distances, each lost in their own thoughts. Artemis leaned against the shattered pillar, her bow in hand, ever watchful. Amaterasu sat cross-legged, meditating, her divine flames flickering faintly. Athena stood closest to Issei, her posture straight and her gaze unwavering, as if daring the world to challenge her decision to serve this dark king. But beneath the quiet, the world stirred. Issei could feel it, A ripple in the fabric of resistance, a last, desperate gasp from those who clung to hope. Artemis was the first to break the silence. The angels will regroup, she said, her voice low but firm. Gabriel may be broken, but Michael remains. And the devils, they'll take advantage of this chaos. They'll see your victories as an opportunity to consolidate their fractured forces. Issei chuckled, the sound dark and dismissive. Let them. The devils, the angels, the humans, they're all predictable. None of them have the vision to challenge me. They're scavengers fighting over scraps. And what of the humans? Amaterasu asked, her golden eyes opening to fix him with a steady gaze. They may be weak, but desperation makes them dangerous. They'll forge alliances with whatever remains of the supernatural factions. They can try, Issei replied, leaning back on his makeshift throne. Humans are nothing more than pests, monkeys scrambling in the dirt. Their attempts to oppose me will be as pathetic as their existence. A sudden surge of energy rippled through the air, drawing everyone's attention. A figure cloaked in darkness stepped forward from the edge of the battlefield. It was one of Issei's scouts, a vampire sworn to his service. My king, the scout said, bowing deeply. There's news. A coalition has been formed, angels, devils, and humans working together. Their leaders are planning to strike against you. Issei's eyes narrowed, a smirk playing on his lips. How quaint. Rats and monkeys banding together, thinking they can topple a god. The scout hesitated. There's more. Among them is someone you might remember, Rias Gremry. For the first time in years, Issei's expression faltered. A flicker of something, anger, betrayal, or perhaps amusement, crossed his face. Rias, he said, her name rolling off his tongue like venom. So, the little princess finally shows her face. Athena stepped forward, her tone measured. If she's involved, it's not just a coalition. It's a rebellion. She'll be rallying those who see you as a common enemy. Issei's smirk returned, sharper than ever. Let her rally them. It will make their downfall all the more satisfying. Artemis frowned, her fingers tightening on her bow. They're gathering strength, and they'll strike where we least expect. If we don't act now, they'll gain the upper hand. Issei rose from his throne, his aura flaring with dark energy. Then we'll strike first. Let them gather their pathetic armies. It won't matter. I'll show them what happens to those who defy me. Turning to Athena, he said. Prepare the troops. I want every faction that dared to join this rebellion to taste despair before their deaths. And as for Rias, his eyes glinted with malice. I'll deal with her personally. As his orders were carried out, Issei retreated to a ruined temple nearby. Athena followed, her steps careful. You hesitated when you heard her name, she said, breaking the silence. Issei didn't turn to face her. I didn't hesitate. You did, she pressed. She was your past, wasn't she? The one who betrayed you, alongside the others. He finally turned, his crimson eyes locking with hers. She wasn't just my past, he said, his voice low and dangerous. She was the first to stab me in the back. The first to look at me like I was nothing. And now, she'll be the first to die when I crush this rebellion. Athena studied him for a moment before nodding. Then let us ensure her death is not just an example, but a declaration. The world needs to see what happens to those who oppose you. Issei's smirk returned, cold and cruel. Oh, they'll see. And they'll learn that no one, not angels, not devils, not even the humans they cling to, can escape my wrath. As the coalition prepared for their assault, Issei's forces moved swiftly. Villages were razed, cities left in ruins, their inhabitants slaughtered without mercy. Word of his cruelty spread like wildfire, striking fear into the hearts of even the most hardened warriors. But fear wasn't enough for Issei. He wanted complete and utter submission. From the ashes of one such city, he stood atop a crumbled skyscraper, his allies gathered below. This is the fate of those who resist me, he declared, his voice echoing across the ruins. Let it serve as a warning. Stand against me, and your existence will be erased. Artemis, standing beside him, nodded. The coalition will hear of this. It will force their hand. Good, Issei said, his smile widening. Let them come. The more they resist, the sweeter their despair will be when I crush them. As the sun rose over the battlefield, Athena stood by Issei's side, her spear in hand. She had chosen this path, chosen to stand with a king who saw the world as nothing more than a plaything, and yet, in his unyielding darkness, she found a purpose, a vision of a new world forged through destruction. "You're ready for this?" Issei asked, his voice calm but commanding. Athena nodded. "I've made my choice. Let the world burn if it must. I'll see your vision realized, no matter the cost." Issei's smirk was sharp as a blade. "Then let's give them a show they'll never forget." As his army surged forward, a tide of darkness and destruction, Issei and his allies prepared to face the rebellion. The world had turned against him, but he would turn it to ash, because in the end, no one, human or supernatural, would stand in the way of his reign. The rebellion's camp lay hidden deep within the forest, its heart alive with the hushed murmurs of angels, devils, and humans. Fires crackled as soldiers sharpened their weapons, their faces grim but determined. It was a fragile alliance, forged out of necessity rather than trust, and every member knew the weight of the gamble they were taking. At the center of the camp stood a tent marked with the insignias of the major factions: Heaven's halo, the Devil's pentagram, and the mortal banner of the Order of Light. Inside, the leaders of the rebellion sat around a table strewn with maps and reports. Rias Gremry leaned forward, her crimson hair falling over her shoulders as she studied their strategy. "Issei's forces are moving faster than expected," she said, her voice tense. "He's not just targeting military strongholds, he's wiping out entire cities, human and supernatural alike." Michael, the Archangel, frowned. "We cannot match his brutality, Rias. If we stoop to his level, we lose the very thing we're fighting to protect. We won't have anything left to protect if we don't act decisively," Serog Bale countered, his fists clenched. "Issei isn't just a tyrant, he's a force of destruction. We can't afford half measures." Gabriel, her form still recovering from her battle with Athena, raised a trembling hand. "I faced one of his generals, and I barely survived. If we face him unprepared, we'll all meet the same fate." Tensions rose as the room erupted into debate. Angels argued for mercy, devils demanded retribution, and the humans, caught between these ancient powers, pleaded for unity. Rias slammed her hand on the table, silencing the room. "Enough!" she snapped. "This isn't about what we want. It's about survival. Issei won't stop until the world is his, and if we don't stand together, we're already defeated." The room fell silent, her words cutting through the discord. Michael sighed. "She's right. As much as it pains me to admit, we cannot afford to let our differences divide us. If we're to stand a chance, we need a unified strategy." Rias nodded. "Then let's move forward. We'll draw him into a trap, a location where his arrogance will work against him." Far from the rebellion's camp, Issei stood atop a hill overlooking another human city. It was a sprawling metropolis, its lights twinkling in the night like stars. To Issei, it was nothing more than a feast waiting to be devoured. Athena approached, her armor gleaming in the moonlight. "The scouts report that the rebellion is fortifying their positions. They're gathering in the forests to the north." Issei smirked, his crimson eyes glinting with malice. "Let them gather. They're like rats huddling together, thinking their numbers will save them." Artemis joined them, her bow slung across her back. "Shall we attack their camp, my king?" "No," Issei said, his voice dripping with cruelty. "Let them think they have the upper hand. We'll hit their supply lines first, starve them, weaken their resolve. By the time we face them, they'll already be broken." He turned to Amaterasu. "Burn the city. Leave nothing standing." The sun goddess bowed her head slightly. "As you command, my king." Moments later, the city was consumed in a blaze of golden fire, its inhabitants screaming as the inferno claimed them. Issei watched impassively, his smirk widening as the flames reflected in his eyes. The rebellion's camp received word of the attack hours later. A lone survivor, a human messenger, stumbled into the camp, his clothes scorched and his face pale with terror. "He destroyed it," the man gasped. "The entire city, gone." He didn't even hesitate. Rias clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. "Damn him," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. "We can't let his cruelty shake us. It's what he wants. Rias shook her head. It's not just cruelty, it's a message. He's trying to break us before we even fight. Gabriel, still weak but resolute, stood. Then we send him a message of our own. We face him, not as fractured factions, but as one united force. We show him that no matter how many cities he burns, he cannot extinguish hope. As the rebellion prepared for the coming battle, Issei sat in his war tent. His allies gathered around him. They'll make their move soon, Athena said. They won't stay in hiding forever. Issei chuckled, his tone mocking. Good. I'm growing bored of these pathetic games. Artemis spoke up. Their coalition grows stronger with each day. We should be cautious. Caution is for the weak, Issei replied coldly. I didn't claw my way to the top by fearing those beneath me. Athena tilted her head, a faint smirk playing on her lips. Then let's make them regret their defiance. Give the order, and we'll ensure their rebellion ends in blood. Issei's smirk widened. Very well. Prepare the troops. We march at dawn. As dawn broke over the ruined landscape, Issei's army began its march. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their advance, a dark tide sweeping across the land. In the distance, the rebellion's forces gathered, their banners fluttering in the wind. Angels, devils, and humans stood side by side, their differences set aside in the face of a greater threat. Rhea stood at the forefront, her crimson aura blazing. This is it, she said, her voice firm. We fight not just for ourselves, but for the world he seeks to destroy. Michael stepped beside her, his blade of light gleaming. May the heavens guide us. As the two forces converged, the world seemed to hold its breath. The battle that would decide the fate of humanity and the supernatural alike was about to begin. And at the heart of it all, Issei Hayato stood as an unrelenting force of destruction, ready to bring the world to its knees. The sun rose, casting an eerie light over the battlefield where two forces stood poised to clash. On one side was Issei Hayato, his dark army of supernatural beings and corrupted gods forming a seemingly endless wave of destruction. On the other, the rebellion, a coalition of angels, devils, and humans, stood as the last bastion of resistance. Issei stood at the forefront of his army, his crimson eyes scanning the opposition with contempt. To him, they were nothing more than vermin clinging to the scraps of a broken world. His lips curled into a smirk, and he raised his hand, dark energy coalescing into a pulsating orb. They're fools, Issei said coldly. Fools who think they can defy me. Let's show them the price of their arrogance. Behind him, Athena stepped forward, her spear glowing with divine energy. Your orders, my king? Break them, Issei replied simply. Leave no survivors. The rebellion made the first move. A volley of angelic spears and devilish magic shot through the air, aimed directly at Issei's army. Explosions rippled across the battlefield as the projectiles struck their targets, scattering dirt and bodies alike. But Issei's forces were unfazed. From within their ranks, Artemis unleashed a barrage of cursed arrows, each one striking true and leaving devastation in its wake. Beside her, Amaterasu conjured a blazing sun, hurling it toward the enemy lines and incinerating anything in its path. Rias Gremory stood at the forefront of the rebellion, her crimson aura flaring. Push forward. Don't let them overwhelm us. She shouted, leading her faction into battle. Michael and Gabriel fought side by side, their holy light cutting through the darkness like a beacon. Despite their injuries, they fought with unwavering determination, rallying their troops to stand against Issei's might. As the battle raged, Issei watched with detached amusement. He raised his hand, and the ground beneath the rebellion's forces erupted, black tendrils of energy snaking out to ensnare and crush his enemies. Screams filled the air as soldiers were dragged into the abyss, their bodies consumed by his power. Is that all they have? Issei muttered, his tone dripping with disdain. Athena approached him, her spear dripping with the blood of her enemies. They fight with desperation, my king. But desperation breeds recklessness, Issei chuckled. Indeed. And recklessness leads to death. He stepped forward, his aura expanding and casting a shadow over the battlefield. With a single motion, he unleashed a wave of destruction that tore through the enemy lines, leaving nothing but ash in its wake. Rias and her allies fought valiantly, their combined efforts managing to hold the line against Issei's onslaught. Serord Baal unleashed his full power, his fists shattering the ground with every strike as he tore through Issei's soldiers. "Keep pushing!" Serog roared, his voice carrying over the chaos. "We can't let him win!" Michael summoned a barrier of holy light, shielding his comrades from one of Amaterasu's devastating attacks. "We must focus on their leaders. Take them down, and the rest will falter." Gabriel nodded, her wings shimmering as she soared toward Athena. "Then let me handle her." The two goddesses clashed in a flurry of divine power, their battle shaking the very earth beneath them. Athena fought with ruthless precision, her every move designed to exploit Gabriel's weaknesses. "You're a fool to stand against us," Athena said, her voice cold. "Issei will reshape this world into something far greater than your pitiful ideals." Gabriel gritted her teeth, blocking another strike. "He's a tyrant, Athena. And you're nothing more than his pawn," Athena smirked. "A pawn? No, Gabriel. I'm his weapon. And a weapon's purpose is to destroy." As the battle raged on, Issei finally stepped onto the battlefield, his presence alone sending waves of fear through the rebellion's ranks. His allies stepped aside, giving him room to unleash his full power. Rhea saw him approaching and clenched her fists. "Issei!" she shouted, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. He turned to her, his crimson eyes devoid of any recognition. "Rias," he said mockingly. "Still clinging to your ideals, I see. Pathetic. How can you do this?" she demanded. "How can you destroy everything we once fought to protect?" Issei smirked. "Because it was all meaningless. Humanity, the factions, even you, they're all beneath me. And now, you'll share their fate." With a wave of his hand, Issei unleashed a torrent of cursed energy that ripped through the battlefield, forcing Rias to retreat. The rebellion was pushed to its limits, their forces dwindling under the relentless assault. Rias, Michael, and Serog regrouped, their faces grim. "We can't win like this," Michael admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Issei is too powerful." Rias shook her head. "We have to keep fighting. If we give up now, everything we've done will have been for nothing." Gabriel, bloodied but still standing, approached them. "There's one chance. We combine our power, everything we have, and strike at Issei directly. It's a long shot, but it's the only shot we have." The leaders exchanged glances, their resolve hardening. "Then we fight," Rias said firmly. Together. As the rebellion gathered for one final push, Issei stood at the center of the battlefield, his aura of destruction flaring around him. "You're persistent," he said, his tone mocking. "But persistence won't save you." The leaders of the rebellion charged toward him, their combined power creating a brilliant explosion of light and energy. For a moment, it seemed as though they might succeed. But when the dust settled, Issei emerged unscathed, his smirk wider than ever. "Is that all?" he taunted. "Pathetic." With a single motion, he unleashed a devastating attack that obliterated the rebellion's front lines, leaving their leaders battered and broken. As the rebellion's forces crumbled, Issei stood triumphant, his laughter echoing across the battlefield. "This is the fate of those who oppose me," he declared, his voice filled with malice. "Kneel, or be destroyed." Despite their defeat, the rebellion's leaders refused to surrender, their resolve unbroken even in the face of death. Issei smirked, his crimson eyes gleaming. "Fools! You'll die like the rest." As the battlefield was consumed by darkness, Issei's reign of terror continued, his path of destruction leaving nothing but ash and despair in its wake. The battlefield lay in ruins, a testament to Issei Hayate's unrelenting wrath. The air was thick with the stench of death and ash, and the once proud rebellion had been reduced to a smoldering memory. Yet, among the rubble, the leaders of the resistance still clung to life, battered and broken but defiant to the end. Issei stood above them, his crimson eyes gleaming with malice. Around him, the remnants of his army waited in silence, their loyalty unwavering. Athena, Artemis, and Amaterasu stood at his side, their expressions cold and resolute. "You've lost," Issei said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Your struggle was meaningless, your ideals laughable. All that remains now is for you to embrace the inevitable." Rias Gremory, bloodied but still standing, lifted her head to meet Issei's gaze. Her crimson aura flickered weakly, a shadow of its former brilliance. "You think this is over?" she spat, her voice hoarse but defiant. You may have defeated us today, but you'll never truly win. As long as there's even a single soul left to resist you, your rule will never be absolute. Issei chuckled darkly, his amusement evident. Spoken like a true fool. Resistance is a delusion, Rias. One I will crush underfoot, along with everything else you hold dear. Behind her, Michael struggled to rise, his holy light dim but persistent. This isn't just about us, Issei, he said, his voice laced with pain. Your actions will bring about your own downfall. Power corrupts, and you've already lost yourself to it. Issei's smirk widened. Lost myself? No. Michael. I've found myself. I've embraced the truth of this world, that strength is the only currency that matters. The weak exist to serve or to perish, and you, he pointed a finger at the fallen archangel, are weak. Athena stepped forward, her spear glowing with divine energy. She turned to Issei, her expression unreadable. What would you have us do with them, my king? Their lives are yours to decide. Issei looked over the defeated leaders of the rebellion, his gaze cold and calculating. To him, they were no more than insects, struggling futilely against the inevitable. Kill the angels, he said simply. Their light is a blight on my world. Athena nodded and stepped toward Michael and Gabriel, her spear poised to strike. The two angels exchanged a glance. Their expressions grim but resolute. Do your worst, Gabriel said, her voice steady. With a swift motion, Athena struck, her spear piercing their hearts and extinguishing their light forever. Issei turned his attention to Rias and the remaining devils. He crouched before her. His crimson eyes stared into hers. You were my comrade once, Rias, he said, his tone almost mocking. But you chose to stand against me. Tell me, was it worth it? Rias glared at him, her hatred burning brighter than her fear. I'd rather die standing against you than live serving a monster, Issei smirked. Oh, you won't die, Rias. Death is a mercy you don't deserve. He raised a hand, dark energy swirling around his fingers. With a flick of his wrist, he unleashed a curse upon her and the surviving devils. Their bodies twisted and convulsed, their screams echoing across the battlefield as the curse took hold. You'll serve me in another way, Issei said coldly. As mindless beasts, forever bound to my will. A fitting punishment for your betrayal. The cursed devils fell to their knees, their once proud forms reduced to monstrous shadows of their former selves. Issei rose, his gaze shifting to the distant human cities still untouched by his wrath. Monkeys, he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. Weak, foolish creatures. Their existence is an insult to my reign. He extended his hand, and a massive sphere of dark energy began to form, pulsating with unrestrained power. The sky darkened as the sphere grew, its malevolence suffocating. My king, Amaterasu said, stepping forward. Do you intend to wipe them all out? Issei turned to her, his expression unreadable. They're nothing but insects. Their lives hold no value to me. Let their screams herald the dawn of my new world. With emotion, he hurled the sphere toward the cities, the impact creating a massive explosion that engulfed the horizon in flames. Millions of lives were snuffed out in an instant, their cries swallowed by the inferno. As the smoke cleared, Issei stood amidst the ruins, his aura of dominance unchallenged. His army knelt before him. Their loyalty absolute. This is the beginning, he declared, his voice echoing across the desolate land. The beginning of a world where I am the only god. Where strength is law, and weakness is eradicated. Athena stepped beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. What's next, my king? Issei smirked, his crimson eyes gleaming. We conquer what remains. And then, we ascend beyond this pitiful plane of existence. The universe itself will bow to me. As the ashes of the old world settled, Issei's vision of a new era began to take shape, an era ruled by darkness, where mercy and hope were relics of a forgotten past. The wasteland stretched as far as the eye could see, a desolate reminder of Issei Hayate's merciless campaign. Cities lay in ruins, their inhabitants reduced to ash or enslaved by his curse. The supernatural factions had been dismantled, their leaders slain or subjugated. Yet, in the shadows of this apocalyptic world, whispers of defiance began to stir. Deep within a hidden sanctuary carved into the mountains, a group of survivors gathered. They were a ragtag band of humans, angels, devils, and gods, those who had escaped Issei's wrath. Among them stood Azazel, the former Governor-General of the fallen angels, his once proud demeanor now tempered by exhaustion and grief. Issei's power grows stronger every day, Azazel said, his voice grim. If we don't act soon, there won't be anything left to save. Beside him, Rosweiss, her Valkyrie armor tarnished but intact, nodded. We've lost so much already. But there has to be a way to stop him. No one is invincible. A voice spoke up from the shadows, calm yet filled with conviction. You're right. No one is invincible, not even Issei Hayato. The group turned to see Yasaka, the leader of the Yukai faction, step forward. Her golden eyes burned with determination. But defeating him will require more than just strength. We need strategy, unity, and most of all, hope. As the rebels began to form their plans, Issei's forces continued their march of domination. In the heart of a ruined city, Issei sat upon a makeshift throne, his crimson eyes surveying his generals. Athena knelt before him, her expression stoic. My king, our scouts have reported unusual activity in the northern mountains. It seems a group of survivors has begun to organize. Issei's smirk was devoid of humor. Survivors? No. They're pests, scurrying about in the shadows. And like all pests, they will be exterminated. Amaterasu stepped forward, her fiery aura flickering in the dim light. Shall we dispatch a strike force to deal with them, my king? Issei shook his head. No. This is a task I will handle personally. Let them see the futility of their rebellion. Let them witness the wrath of a god. The sanctuary trembled as Issei descended upon it, his arrival heralded by a wave of cursed energy that darkened the sky. The rebels scrambled to defend their position, their meager forces no match for Issei's overwhelming power. Azazel led the charge, his sacred light clashing against Issei's dark energy. You've gone too far, Issei! He shouted, his voice echoing across the battlefield. This madness will consume you. Issei laughed, the sound cold and cruel. Madness? No, Azazel. This is clarity. This is the truth of the world. With a single motion, Issei unleashed a torrent of black flames, consuming the front line of the rebel forces. Screams filled the air as the survivors were reduced to ash. Rosweiss and Yasaka fought valiantly, their combined powers managing to hold Issei at bay for a brief moment. But it was clear they were outmatched. Is this all you have? Issei taunted, his crimson eyes gleaming with malice. This is the best the so-called resistance can muster? Pathetic. Realizing the battle was lost, Azazel made a split-second decision. Fall back! He shouted. We can't win this fight. Not here, not now. Reluctantly, the rebels began their retreat, their forces scattering into the mountains. Issei watched them flee, his expression one of disdain. Run, little insects, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. It won't save you. As the last of the rebels disappeared into the shadows, Issei turned to Athena and Amaterasu, who had joined him on the battlefield. Let them go, he said. They'll lead us to the rest of their kind. And when they do, we'll crush them all in one decisive blow. As Issei and his forces returned to their stronghold, Athena couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She approached Artemis, her voice low. Issei's power is absolute, Athena said. But his arrogance may be his undoing. Artemis nodded, her expression thoughtful. He underestimates the resilience of those who oppose him. And in doing so, he may create the very spark that leads to his downfall. Back at the rebel sanctuary, Azazel gathered the survivors. Though their losses had been devastating, their resolve remained unbroken. We can't defeat Issei Hedon, Azazel said. But there may be another way. If we can weaken his forces, disrupt his control over his allies, we might stand a chance. Yasaka stepped forward, her golden eyes blazing. Then we fight in the shadows. We strike where he least expects it. And we remind the world that hope is not yet lost. As the rebels began their preparations, Issei's reign of terror continued. Cities burned, factions fell, and the world descended further into darkness. But amidst the chaos, the seeds of rebellion began to take root. And though Issei's power seemed unassailable, cracks began to form in the foundation of his empire. For even the mightiest of gods could not escape the consequences of their own hubris. The skies over Issei's domain were eternally dark, a testament to his overwhelming dominance. Yet, within the vast expanse of his conquered world, faint ripples of rebellion began to spread. The cracks in his empire, though small, were undeniable. In the grand throne room of his fortress, Issei sat on his obsidian throne, his crimson eyes surveying his generals. Athena, Amaterasu, and Artemis stood before him, their expressions unreadable but their postures respectful. "News has reached me," Issei began, his voice cold and authoritative, "that the remnants of our enemies have begun organizing. They think they can defy me. Tell me, what should be done with such insolence?" Amaterasu stepped forward, her fiery presence commanding attention. "We crush them, my king. Annihilate their base of operations and scatter them to the winds." Athena raised a hand, her tone measured. "While annihilation is inevitable, my king, we should use this opportunity to lure them out further. Let them gather their forces, believing they stand a chance, and then we strike when their hope is at its peak. The despair of complete defeat will break them far more effectively." Issei's lips curled into a cruel smirk. "A sound plan, Athena. Let them believe their pathetic rebellion matters. Their despair will be a feast worth savoring." Far from Issei's fortress, the rebellion moved in silence. Azazel and Yasaka led their forces deeper into the mountains, searching for allies and resources to sustain their cause. The sanctuary was no longer safe, and each passing day brought new dangers. Rosweiss approached Azazel, her armor still bearing scorch marks from their previous encounter with Issei. "We've received word from the Norse pantheon. Thor may be willing to join us." Azazel frowned, his golden eyes narrowing. "Thor's strength would be invaluable, but he's unpredictable. If he decides to act independently, he could jeopardize everything." Yasaka stepped forward, her tone calm yet resolute. "We don't have the luxury of choice, Azazel. If we're to stand any chance against Issei, we need every ally we can muster, even if they're unreliable." Reluctantly, Azazel nodded. "Then we move. Contact Thor and arrange a meeting. But make it clear, this rebellion cannot afford chaos. We need strategy, not brute force." Meanwhile, back in Issei's stronghold, subtle tensions began to surface among his allies. Athena and Artemis walked the corridors of the fortress, their voices low. "Issei grows stronger with every victory," Artemis said, her silver eyes reflecting concern. "But his disdain for humanity and the supernatural alike blinds him to the risks of rebellion. Even gods are not infallible." Athena's expression was unreadable. "He sees us all as tools, pawns to serve his will. But tools have their limits. If he continues to underestimate the resolve of his enemies, it could lead to unforeseen consequences." Artemis glanced at her sister. "And what of us, Athena? Do we remain loyal to a king who sees us as expendable?" Athena's gaze hardened. "For now we serve. But should the time come when his vision falters, we must be prepared to act, for our own survival, if nothing else." In the northern territories, Azazel and his team met with Thor. The god of thunder stood tall, his presence as imposing as the storm clouds that seemed to follow him. "You're asking me to join your little rebellion," Thor said, his voice a deep rumble. "Against the Red Dragon Emperor himself?" Bold but reckless, Azazel stepped forward, his golden eyes unwavering. "Reckless or not, it's the only choice we have. You've seen what Issei has done to the world. If we don't stand together, there won't be anything left." Thor stroked his beard thoughtfully, his stormy eyes scanning the group. "You have courage, fallen angel. Very well. I'll join your cause for now. But know this, I won't follow orders from cowards." Yasaka's golden eyes glimmered with a faint smile. "Then prove your strength on the battlefield, Thor. We'll need it." Back in Issei's fortress, the king himself sat in solitude, his mind a storm of dark thoughts. Despite his overwhelming power, the whispers of rebellion gnawed at him. He rose from his throne and walked to a massive window overlooking his domain. Below, cities burned and humanity cowered in fear. "They think they can defy me," Issei muttered to himself. "Fools! This world belongs to me now. Their hope will only make their fall all the sweeter." As his cursed energy flared, the room darkened, the air thick with malice. Yet, in the shadows, Athena watched him silently, her mind racing with thoughts she dared not voice. The rebellion continued to grow, their numbers bolstered by Thor's presence. But they knew the battle ahead would test their resolve like never before. Azazel stood before the gathered forces, his voice steady and commanding. This fight isn't just about survival. It's about reclaiming a world that's been stolen from us. We face a god, but even gods can fall. The crowd erupted in cheers, their morale bolstered despite the odds. But deep within the heart of every soldier there was fear of the monster who awaited them. Back in Issei's domain, Athena approached her king, her expression composed but thoughtful. "My king," she said, bowing slightly. "The rebels are moving. Their forces grow stronger. It would be wise to crush them before they gain further momentum." Issei smirked, his crimson eyes gleaming. "Let them gather. Let them hope. When I strike, it will be with such force that their despair will echo through eternity." Athena nodded, but as she turned to leave, a flicker of doubt crossed her eyes. For even as the shadows stirred, the seeds of betrayal began to take root. The throne room was silent, the air heavy with tension as Issei sat on his obsidian seat. His crimson eyes, glowing faintly, scanned the map laid before him. Each red mark represented a rebel stronghold, a festering wound in his empire. Athena, Amaterasu, Artemis, and Sona stood before him. Each bore the weight of their respective duties with unwavering discipline. But something lingered in Issei's mind, a subtle shift he couldn't quite explain. For years he had seen them all as tools, instruments to further his vision of annihilation and domination. Yet, in their unwavering service, a faint glimmer of something else began to stir. "Report," Issei commanded, his voice cold but not as biting as before. Athena stepped forward, her tone calm and measured. "The rebellion has gained another foothold in the northern mountains. Thor has joined their ranks, bolstering their strength significantly. Azazel and Issaka are rallying remnants of the pantheons." Issei's eyes narrowed at the mention of Thor. "They think strength alone can oppose me? Fools! Thor will die like the rest of them," Amaterasu interjected, her golden eyes glowing. "Their forces may be growing, but their morale is still fragile. A decisive strike could shatter their hope entirely." Issei nodded but didn't immediately respond. His gaze lingered on Athena for a moment longer than usual, noticing the determination in her eyes. Later that evening, Issei wandered the halls of his fortress, the weight of his dominion pressing against his mind. He stopped in one of the observation towers, staring out at the ruined world he had created. Athena found him there, her steps deliberate but light. She stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You've been restless," she said, breaking the silence. Issei didn't look at her. "This world is mine, Athena. Yet the cracks persist. Rebellion grows like a disease." "Rebellions are born from desperation," Athena replied. "They cling to hope, even if it's futile. But hope can be turned into despair, my king. You've done it before." Her words struck a chord, but not in the way they once would have. He turned to her, his crimson eyes scrutinizing her face. "You speak of loyalty often. Tell me, Athena, why do you serve me? Is it because you truly believe in my vision, or is it something else?" Athena met his gaze without hesitation. "I serve you because the gods of old failed this world. Their hubris destroyed more than they ever protected. You, my king, have the power to shape a new order, an order where strength and resolve prevail over hypocrisy." Her words were deliberate, calculated. But there was a flicker of sincerity that Issei couldn't ignore. For the first time, he considered the possibility that loyalty might mean more than utility. In the rebel camp, Thor stood among the gathered forces, his booming laughter cutting through the tense atmosphere. Azazel frowned as the god of thunder regaled the troops with tales of his exploits. "Thor, this isn't a game," Azazel said sharply. "Issei isn't an enemy you can overpower with brute force. We need strategy." Thor smirked, his stormy eyes glinting. "Strategy is for those who fear battle. I'll face the Red Dragon Emperor Hedon and crush him." Issaka sighed, stepping between them. "Both of you enough. We're allies, not enemies. Thor, you'll have your chance to fight Issei. But until then, we need to focus on uniting our forces." The tension between the two leaders was palpable, but Yasaka's calming presence eased the room. Back in the fortress, Issei called a meeting with his generals. The rebels had launched a surprise attack on one of his outposts, a move that demanded immediate retaliation. Sona, Issei said, his gaze fixed on the young tactician. What's your assessment? Sona adjusted her glasses, her voice steady. The attack was strategically sound but lacked follow-through. It was likely a diversion. The main force is still hidden, waiting for us to overcommit. Issei nodded slowly, impressed by her insight. Then we won't play into their hands. Athena, you'll lead a small strike force to draw them out. Artemis, you'll provide ranged support. Sona, I want you coordinating from the rear. Amaterasu, ensure no one escapes alive. As the meeting ended, Athena lingered. You trust Sona with such a critical role, my king? Issei's expression softened, if only slightly. She's proven herself capable. Her mind is sharp, her loyalty unquestionable. Tools or not, they serve their purpose well. Athena raised an eyebrow but said nothing. A faint smile played at her lips as she left, leaving Issei to his thoughts. During the mission, Athena and Artemis led their forces into the mountains, their movements swift and precise. As predicted, the rebels fell into the trap, their forces exposed. Amid the chaos, Athena fought with unparalleled precision, her spear striking down enemy after enemy. From a distance, Artemis's arrows rained death upon the rebels, each shot perfectly placed. Watching from a distance, Issei observed their efficiency. For the first time, he felt a flicker of something beyond mere satisfaction. They're more than tools, he muttered to himself, his crimson eyes narrowing. They're extensions of my will, my servants, my instruments of domination. But even as he thought this, a faint, unfamiliar warmth crept into his heart. Was it respect? Admiration? He quickly dismissed the notion. As the rebels regrouped, their leaders debated their next move. Azazel's frustration grew with each passing day, while Thor's impatience threatened to undermine their plans. Back in Issei's fortress, the king sat alone in his chambers, the weight of his thoughts heavier than ever. For years, he had seen the world in black and white, power and weakness, loyalty and betrayal. But now, shades of gray began to creep into his perception. Athena's unwavering resolve, Amaterasu's fiery determination, Sona's sharp intellect, each had proven their worth time and time again. Perhaps, he mused, staring into the darkness. Perhaps they are more than tools. The thought unsettled him, but it also intrigued him. For the first time, Issei began to question his own beliefs. The air within the throne room was stifling, heavy with unspoken tension. Issei sat on his obsidian throne, his crimson eyes glowing faintly as his generals reported their successes. Athena stood tall, her armor glinting faintly in the dim light. The northern rebellion has been quelled, my king. Thor's forces have suffered significant losses, and their morale is faltering. However, Thor himself remains elusive. Elusive? Issei's voice was calm, yet there was an edge to it. The god of thunder hides from a fight? How amusing. Amaterasu stepped forward, her golden eyes gleaming. He's likely regrouping. His arrogance is boundless, but even he must see the futility of his efforts. Shall I pursue him? Issei shook his head. No. Let him stew in his failure. A desperate enemy is far more entertaining to crush. The faintest hint of a smirk crossed his lips, but it quickly faded as his gaze swept over his gathered allies. His mind lingered on each of them, Athena, the unyielding, Amaterasu, the fiery, Artemis, the calculating, Sona, the brilliant. For years, they had been his instruments of destruction. But now, doubt gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. Later that evening, Issei ventured to the outskirts of his fortress. The ruins of a human city stretched before him, its crumbling buildings bathed in the eerie glow of his cursed energy. Humans, the so-called dominant species, scurried like insects in the shadows, desperate to avoid his notice. Pathetic, he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. They cling to life like rats in a sinking ship. Yet, as he observed them, a flicker of something unfamiliar stirred within him. He dismissed it as weakness, a remnant of his past self. Athena appeared at his side, her presence quiet yet commanding. You despise them, she said, her tone neutral. And yet you continue to watch. They amuse me, Issei replied, his eyes never leaving the struggling humans. Their desperation, their futility, it's entertaining. Athena's gaze shifted to him, her expression unreadable. Perhaps. Or perhaps you see something of yourself in them. He turned to her, his eyes narrowing. Tread carefully, Athena. I am not like them. No, you're not, she said calmly. But even you were once human, were you not? Perhaps some part of you remembers. Issei didn't respond. Instead, he turned away, retreating to the fortress. In the rebel camp, Thor slammed his fist into a table, his frustration boiling over. We're wasting time. Issei grows stronger with each passing day, and all we do is hide. Azazel sighed, rubbing his temples. Thor, we're not hiding. We're regrouping. There's a difference. Issei's forces are vast, and his generals are relentless. Charging in blindly will only get us killed. Yasaka placed a calming hand on Thor's shoulder. Azazel is right. We need to be patient. Issei's power is immense, but even he has limits. We just need to find them. Thor scowled but said nothing. Back in the fortress, Issei summoned Sona to his chambers. The young tactician entered, her demeanor calm but curious. You've done well, Issei said, his tone surprisingly even. Your strategies have been instrumental in our victories. Sona blinked, surprised by the rare praise. Thank you, my king. I live to serve. Issei studied her, his expression unreadable. Do you truly mean that, Sona? Do you serve because of loyalty, or because you fear me? Sona hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I serve because I believe in your vision, my king. The old world was flawed beyond repair. You've given us the means to create something better. Issei's gaze lingered on her, and for a brief moment, his cold exterior softened. Perhaps, he said quietly. Or perhaps you're simply better at lying than most. Sona met his gaze, unflinching. Perhaps, my king. But the results speak for themselves. A faint smirk tugged at Issei's lips. Indeed they do. That night, Issei sat alone in his chambers, his mind restless. For years, his hatred had driven him, his desire for revenge consuming every thought. But now, cracks were beginning to form in the walls he had built around himself. The loyalty of his allies, the desperation of humanity, the unwavering determination of his enemies, all of it gnawed at the edges of his cold resolve. For the first time, he questioned whether his path was as certain as he had believed. But doubt was a weakness he couldn't afford. Emotions are a luxury, he muttered to himself, his crimson eyes glowing in the darkness. And luxuries are for the weak. Yet, even as he spoke the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing, something he couldn't control. The fortress was alive with activity, the hum of preparations echoing through its ancient halls. Armies were being marshaled, weapons forged, and strategies refined. Issei stood atop the battlements, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the faint lights of the next human city flickered like dying embers. Beside him stood Artemis, her bow slung casually over her shoulder. The humans are rallying, she said, her voice calm yet tinged with curiosity. Small factions band together, forming a weak resistance. Shall I silence them? Issei waved her off. Let them gather. 1,000 ants are still ants. They pose no threat. Yet his words lacked the venom they once held. For reasons he couldn't explain, the sight of humanity struggling stirred something other than contempt within him. Down in the lower halls of the fortress, Athena oversaw the training of new recruits. These weren't humans, devils, or even gods, they were aberrations, creatures born from Issei's cursed energy. Twisted, monstrous beings, devoid of free will and driven only by their master's commands. You expect these things to fight alongside us? Amaterasu asked, her voice laced with disdain as she approached. Athena turned, her expression impassive. They are tools, nothing more. They will fight, kill, and die as needed. Amaterasu's golden eyes narrowed. And what of us? Are we also tools in his eyes? Athena hesitated, her grip tightening on her spear. We serve because we choose to. But yes, to him, we are tools. It is his way of ensuring loyalty. And yet you remain loyal, Amaterasu said, her tone challenging. Athena's gaze hardened. Because I believe in what he will create. A world free of the old god's corruption and humanity's weakness. Amaterasu didn't respond, but the flicker of doubt in her eyes was unmistakable. As the sun set, Issei summoned his generals to the war room. A massive map sprawled across the table, marking the positions of enemy factions and potential targets. The humans grow bold, Issei said, his voice cold. They'd begun amassing weapons imbued with divine power. Left unchecked, they could become a nuisance. Sona leaned forward, studying the map. We should strike their supply lines. Cut off their resources and starve them out. Athena nodded in agreement. A swift, decisive blow could cripple them before they fully mobilize. Amaterasu, however, hesitated. What of their civilians? Many of them are innocent. Should we not focus solely on their leaders? Issei's crimson eyes locked onto her, his expression unreadable. Innocent? There are no innocents in war, Amaterasu. Only those who serve a purpose and those who do not. Her gaze didn't waver, though her tone softened. Even so, my king, slaughtering them en masse might breed resentment among our own forces. Not all share your perspective. For a moment, Issei said nothing. Then, to everyone's surprise, he nodded. Very well. Spare the civilians, for now. But if they take up arms, they forfeit their lives. The room fell silent, the decision hanging heavy in the air. On the other side of the battlefield, Thor and his allies made their move. Using ancient runes and divine artifacts, they launched a surprise attack on one of Issei's outposts, catching his forces off guard. The battle was fierce, and though the rebels suffered heavy losses, they managed to secure a key victory. Thor stood amidst the ruins, his hammer crackling with energy. This is only the beginning, he said, his voice filled with determination. Issei Hayadu will fall. News of the attack reached Issei by morning. He sat in his throne room, his expression a mask of calm as Athena delivered the report. They've grown bold, she said, her voice tinged with irritation. Thor led the attack himself. He's testing our defenses. Then let him test, Issei replied, his tone cold. He'll find nothing but death. Athena hesitated. My king, perhaps it's time to reconsider your stance on alliances. There are still factions that could be swayed to our side. Issei's eyes narrowed. Alliances are built on trust, Athena. And trust is a weakness I cannot afford. Not all alliances require trust, she countered. Sometimes, mutual benefit is enough. For the first time in years, Issei considered her words. That night, Issei wandered the halls of his fortress, his mind troubled. He passed by the barracks, where his soldiers rested after another grueling day. Among them, he noticed Sona and Artemis speaking in hushed tones, their expressions surprisingly light. Curious, he stepped closer, remaining hidden in the shadows. I never thought I'd find myself here, Artemis said, her voice soft. Fighting alongside someone like him, Sona smirked. And yet here you are. Admit it, you've grown to respect him. Artemis hesitated, then nodded. He's ruthless, yes. But there's something about him, something I can't quite put into words. Issei turned away, their words lingering in his mind. For the first time, he wondered if his allies saw him as more than a tyrant. And for the first time, he didn't know how to feel about it. The storm that had been brewing across the land finally broke. News arrived that the rebellion had grown bold, striking not only at outposts but also infiltrating Issei's inner territories. It was clear now that their benefactor was not just a minor force but a power capable of turning the tide. Issei stood before his gathered council, his eyes burning with anger and something more complex, frustration. Whoever this benefactor is, Issei growled, they've orchestrated every move against us. They think they can hide in shadows. But shadows belong to me. Athena stepped forward, her gaze steady. I encountered them, my king. A figure cloaked in light, wielding divine energy. They claim to be a shepherd for the lost. Whoever they are, they're powerful enough to evade even my attacks. Another god trying to meddle in my affairs. Issei sneered. His fingers curled into fists, crimson energy rippling through his form. Let them try. They'll learn, as all the others have, that I am not so easily defeated. Despite the confidence in his words, Issei knew he couldn't afford to underestimate this adversary. He sent Amaterasu and Artemis to investigate reports of a hidden sanctuary harboring rebel leaders, while Athena and Sona were tasked with fortifying the inner cities. As the missions unfolded, cracks began to form. Whispers of dissent within their ranks surfaced, fueled by rumors that Issei's reign was faltering. Rebellion sympathizers had infiltrated even his trusted circles, sowing seeds of betrayal. Sona, ever the strategist, uncovered a troubling pattern. Documents seized from rebel camps detailed troop movements and vulnerabilities that only someone within Issei's army could have leaked. "This isn't just an external threat," Sona told Issei in private. "Someone within your ranks is feeding the rebellion information." Issei's expression darkened. "Then we'll root them out. And they'll suffer a traitor's death." While the investigations continued, Amaterasu and Artemis discovered the location of the sanctuary, a hidden fortress nestled in the Dawnspire Mountains. Leading an elite force, they launched an assault under cover of darkness. The battle was brutal, with rebel forces putting up an unexpectedly fierce resistance. Amaterasu's radiant power illuminated the battlefield, while Artemis' precision decimated enemy ranks. Together, they pushed the rebels back, gaining ground inch by bloody inch. But as they neared the sanctuary's heart, a trap was sprung. Divine runes etched into the walls activated, unleashing a torrent of energy that tore through their ranks. Amaterasu shielded Artemis with her body, absorbing the brunt of the blast. "Go!" she shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "But, now!" Reluctantly, Artemis retreated, carrying the injured Amaterasu to safety. The sanctuary was lost, but they had uncovered something vital, a symbol etched into the runes that matched the one Sona had found in the rebel documents. When the survivors returned to Issei's fortress, Amaterasu's injuries and the sanctuary's destruction only fueled his fury. He stood in the war room, his energy suffusing the air with a suffocating pressure. "Whoever betrayed us," Issei said, his voice cold and venomous, "will beg for mercy before the end. And they will receive none." Sona stepped forward, placing the rebel documents alongside sketches of the runes from the sanctuary. "The symbol is consistent. This benefactor isn't just aiding them, they're guiding them, using ancient divine magic to shield their operations." "And what do you propose we do about it?" Issei asked, his tone sharper than intended. "We use their methods against them," Sona replied. "Find their sanctuaries, infiltrate their networks, and turn their own tools into weapons for our cause." Issei regarded her for a long moment. "You've grown bold, Sona. But I'll allow it, for now." Later that night, Issei found himself alone, the weight of leadership pressing heavier than ever. For all his power, the rebellion persisted. For all his victories, his empire felt as though it were built on crumbling stone. He thought of Athena's unyielding loyalty, Sona's brilliance, Artemis' courage, and Amaterasu's sacrifice. Tools, he reminded himself, yet that word no longer fit as it once had. A shadow flickered across the room, and Athena stepped forward. "You doubt yourself," she said, her voice devoid of judgment. Issei didn't deny it. "Every victory feels hollow. Every loss reminds me that even I have limits." Athena approached, her gaze steady. "Limits aren't weaknesses, Issei. They're opportunities to grow stronger. You've built this empire through fear and force, but perhaps it's time to wield something greater." He turned to her, crimson eyes narrowing. "And what would that be?" "Trust," she said simply. Just as Athena's words began to sink in, the doors to the throne room burst open. Artemis stormed in, dragging a bloodied figure behind her. "My king," she said, throwing the traitor to the ground. "We found them attempting to smuggle rebel correspondence out of the city." The traitor looked up, their face twisted with fear and defiance. "You think you can stop the rebellion? You're a monster, Issei Hayadu, a tyrant who rules through cruelty. Your allies will betray you, just as I did." Issei's gaze burned into the traitor's soul. "Perhaps they will," he said coldly. "But not today." With a flick of his wrist, dark energy engulfed the traitor, reducing them to ash. The rebellion's presence loomed larger than ever, yet Issei's empire had grown accustomed to his reign of terror. His dominion stretched across the realms, and every faction had been brought to its knees, but cracks had begun to appear. In his throne room, Issei sat in silence, contemplating recent events. For all his power, the rebellion had survived. Worse, its attacks were becoming bolder, targeting key resources and sanctuaries. Athena entered the chamber, her armor faintly glowing from recent battle. She approached him, her movements calm yet purposeful. "The latest report from Artemis," she began, placing a scroll on the table. "The rebellion has established a stronghold in the Azure Wastes. It's heavily fortified with divine barriers, and their numbers grow daily." Issei unfurled the scroll, his crimson eyes scanning the map. His expression was unreadable, but the crackling energy in the air betrayed his frustration. "And their benefactor?" he asked. "Still unknown," Athena admitted. "But their strategy suggests divine insight. Only someone intimately familiar with our weaknesses could orchestrate this level of resistance." Issei leaned back in his throne, his gaze distant. "The gods remain a pest that refuses to die." The council gathered, each member reporting on their respective fronts. Artemis detailed the stronghold's defenses, Sona outlined potential counter-strategies, and Amaterasu silently nursed her injuries from the previous battle. "The Azure Wastes are a trap," Sona warned, her voice sharp. "If we attack directly, we'll be fighting on their terms. We need to outmaneuver them, and let them grow stronger while we sit idly by." Artemis snapped, her fiery temper showing. "Every moment we delay gives them more time to prepare." Athena raised a hand, silencing them. "We need precision, not brute force. A calculated strike to decapitate their leadership." Issei watched them, his expression unreadable. Once, he would have dismissed their input, seeing them as little more than tools. Now, he found himself weighing their words, recognizing their unique strengths. "Enough," he said, his voice commanding. "We'll do both. Sona, prepare a diversionary force to draw their attention. Athena, lead an infiltration team to eliminate their leaders. Artemis, you and Amaterasu will spearhead the main assault." The room fell silent, his orders absolute. Yet as the council dispersed, Issei felt a lingering tension among his allies, a sense of unspoken doubt. Later that night, Issei stood on the balcony of his fortress, gazing at the distant horizon. The stars above seemed dim, their light dulled by the miasma of his cursed energy. "You've changed," a voice said behind him. He turned to see Sona, her sharp eyes studying him. "Have I?" he asked, his tone cold but not dismissive. "You listen more," she said, stepping closer. "You consider our opinions, our strengths." "It's unexpected," Issei smirked faintly. "Don't mistake pragmatism for sentiment, Sona. I use the tools best suited for the task. Nothing more." She tilted her head, unconvinced. "Perhaps. But even you must realize that fear alone can't sustain an empire. Loyalty isn't born from terror, it's earned." Issei's smirk faded, replaced by a thoughtful silence. Sona bowed slightly before leaving him alone with his thoughts. The combined assault on the Azure Wastes began at dawn. Sona's diversionary force drew out the rebel vanguard, while Athena's team infiltrated the stronghold's defenses. Artemis and Amaterasu led the main charge, their power cutting through enemy lines like a scythe through wheat. Within the stronghold, Athena and her team moved with precision, dismantling divine wards and eliminating key targets. "We're close," Athena whispered, her spear glowing faintly. "The benefactor must be nearby." Suddenly, the air grew heavy, and a blinding light filled the chamber. A figure descended, cloaked in divine radiance. "You've come far, Athena," the figure said, their voice resonating with an unnatural calm. "But your path ends here." The figure stepped forward, their divine aura intensifying. It was Michael, the archangel who once ruled over heaven's armies. His golden armor shimmered, and his piercing gaze landed on Athena. "Michael, you're still alive," she said, her tone hint of surprise. "I am," he admitted, unflinching. "Someone must stand against the tyranny Issei has unleashed upon the world. You were once a protector, Athena. Have you truly fallen so far?" Athena raised her spear, her resolve unwavering. "I follow a king who will reshape this broken world. Your so-called justice is nothing but an excuse to cling to the past, and I will finish what Issei started." Michael's expression hardened. "Then you leave me no choice." Their clash was cataclysmic, divine and cursed energies colliding with devastating force. As the battle raged within the stronghold, Issei sensed the shift in energy. Without hesitation, he unleashed his full power, teleporting directly into the heart of the conflict. The sight of Michael battling Athena brought a dark smirk to his lips. "Another relic of heaven come to challenge me. How quaint." Michael turned to face him, his expression resolute. Your reign of terror ends here, Issei Hayadu. Issei laughed, the sound echoing ominously. You still alive, insect? Then this time you will die. With a wave of his hand, Issei unleashed a torrent of cursed energy, forcing Michael to divert his attention. Together, he and Athena attacked, their combined might overwhelming even the Archangel. Michael fell, his divine light fading as Issei delivered the final blow. The stronghold crumbled around them, its defenses shattered. But as Issei stood over Michael's broken form, he felt no triumph, only a hollow sense of inevitability. Athena approached, bloody but unbowed. The rebellion is weakened, but it won't end here. Others will rise to take his place, then I'll destroy them all, Issei said coldly. The aftermath of the Azure Wastes battle left the rebellion fractured, but not broken. Despite Michael and Gabriel's deaths, whispers of defiance lingered in the shadows, carried by remnants too stubborn or desperate to surrender. Among those remnants stood Thor, the thunder god, a warrior whose defiance had become the rebellion's rallying cry. His strength was unmatched, his resolve unyielding, but the weight of leadership had begun to take its toll. Thor stood on the scorched plains of Vanaheim, his hammer gripped tightly. Around him, rebel forces gathered in preparation for another strike against Issei's empire. Yet, there was unease in the air, a growing sense of futility as word of Michael's death spread. Issei descended upon Vanaheim like a storm. His dark energy tore through the skies, his crimson eyes burning with malice. Beside him were his loyal allies, Athena, Sona, Artemis, and Amaterasu. The rebel forces barely had time to react before the first wave of destruction fell upon them. Issei's forces carved through their defenses with merciless precision, leaving no survivors in their wake. Thor emerged from the fray, his hammer crackling with divine lightning. He faced Issei, his expression a mixture of rage and determination. You've taken everything from us, Thor growled. Michael, Gabriel, countless lives. It ends here. It's only a matter of time before he comes for us, one of the rebel generals muttered. Without Michael or Gabriel, silence. Thor's voice boomed, thunder rumbling in the distance. We are not broken. We are not defeated. So long as I stand, this rebellion lives. His words sparked a fleeting moment of hope among his followers, but deep within, even Thor knew their days were numbered. Issei smirked, his cursed energy flaring around him. Bold words for a god standing on the edge of extinction. Come, Thunderer. Show me your strength. Their clash shook the very realm, lightning and cursed energy colliding in a storm of destruction. Thor fought with all his might, his attacks fueled by desperation and fury. Yet, Issei's power was overwhelming, his every move calculated and devastating. You're strong, Thor, Issei admitted, dodging a strike that shattered the ground beneath them. But strength without vision is meaningless. You fight for a rebellion that has already lost. Thor roared in defiance, summoning a bolt of lightning that struck Issei Hedon. For a moment, the battlefield was engulfed in blinding light. When the light faded, Issei stood unscathed, his smirk widening. Is that all? Before Thor could react, Issei closed the distance, his claws piercing the thunder god's chest. Thor gasped, blood staining his lips as he fell to his knees. Your defiance ends here, Issei said coldly, his voice devoid of emotion. With a final surge of cursed energy, he ended Thor's life, the thunder god's lifeless body collapsing onto the battlefield. As the rebel forces scattered, a lone figure emerged from the shadows. He was younger, his features strikingly similar to Issei's yet marked by a distinct aura of defiance. It was Jin Hayadu, Issei's estranged brother. He knelt beside Thor's body, his expression a mixture of grief and fury. Rising to his feet, he turned to the remnants of the rebellion. Thor is gone, Jin said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. But his sacrifice will not be in vain. If Issei thinks he's crushed us, he's wrong. We will rise again stronger, smarter, and unrelenting. The rebels, inspired by Jin's determination, rallied around him. For the first time since Michael's death, the rebellion found hope in a new leader. Back in his fortress, Issei sat alone in the throne room, his expression unreadable. The victory at Vanaheim should have felt like triumph, yet a strange emptiness gnawed at him. Athena entered, her gaze sharp. Thor is dead. The rebellion is weakened, but not defeated. Issei's eyes narrowed. They've replaced him. Yes, Athena replied. Your brother, Jean, has taken command. His leadership has already reignited their resolve. Issei's claws dug into the armrests of his throne. Jean. That insect is alive, he muttered, a flicker of something unspoken crossing his features. Athena studied him for a moment before speaking. He is a threat, my king. One you cannot ignore. Issei's crimson eyes glowed with malice. Then I will crush him like I just did to Renji. Jean Haida's rise sent ripples through the fractured remnants of the rebellion. Where despair had settled, defiance now burned anew. He was young, but his fire was undeniable, his hatred for Issei surpassing even that of the gods he now fought alongside. Meanwhile, in the heart of Issei's empire, a storm of conflict brewed within the Dragon King himself. He had killed gods, destroyed entire factions, and reshaped the world in his image, yet something about Jin's defiance unsettled him, not because of fear, but because it was personal. Jin wasted no time in striking back. He led his forces in a bold assault on Issei's outer territories, targeting key strongholds where the Emperor's grip was weakest. The city of Vokrath burned under the rebellion's assault. It was a strategic outpost, vital for controlling trade and supply lines. Without it, cracks would form in Issei's empire. Amaterasu led the counteroffensive, her divine flames scorching the battlefield. Yet Jin proved a formidable foe. His power, though not as overwhelming as Issei's, carried something far more dangerous: ingenuity. He fought with precision, exploiting every weakness in Issei's forces, cutting through generals and warlords like a vengeful blade. By the time reinforcements arrived, Vokrath had fallen. For the first time in years, Issei suffered a true loss. When news of Vokratha's fall reached Issei, the throne room fell into a suffocating silence. His generals knelt, waiting for his reaction. Issei sat unmoving, his fingers pressed together, his crimson eyes glowing dimly. Then, slowly, a smirk formed on his lips. "My dear brother," he murmured. "I see you have learned well." Athena stepped forward. "Jin is no ordinary enemy, my king. He does not fight like the gods. He does not rely on honor or mercy. He fights to win." Issei's smirk faded. "Then I will remind him who he is dealing with." He rose from his throne, his energy crackling like a storm. The room trembled under his presence. "Summon my armies," he commanded. "We march for war." The forces of Issei and Jin finally clashed on the scorched plains of Niflheim, where the ground was littered with the bones of fallen gods. Issei's arrival was heralded by an unnatural eclipse. His very presence sent waves of terror through the battlefield. The weaker warriors collapsed under the weight of his aura alone. Jin, however, stood firm. Clad in dark armor, his blade hummed with stolen divine power. "This ends today, Issei," Jin called out, his voice unwavering. Issei tilted his head, amusement flickering in his gaze. "So eager to die?" "No," Jin said, his grip tightening on his sword. "So eager to kill you." With a roar, the battle began. A clash of blood and destiny. Their fight shook the heavens. Every strike sent shockwaves across the battlefield, warriors on both sides forced to retreat from the sheer destruction their battle unleashed. Jin fought like a man possessed, his every attack honed for one purpose: to kill Issei. And for the first time in centuries, Issei found himself on the defensive. Jin's power wasn't greater. His technique wasn't superior, but his hatred, it burned brighter than anything Issei had ever seen. And for the first time in a long time, Issei felt something unfamiliar: strain. Jin had forced him to fight seriously, and that, Issei realized, was both impressive and infuriating. With a blinding flash, their final attacks clashed. The explosion of energy tore through the battlefield, forcing everyone back. As the dust settled, Jin knelt on one knee, blood dripping from his mouth. His sword was shattered, his armor cracked, but he was alive. Issei, standing before him, was unharmed, though his clothes were lightly torn, a testament to the fact that Jin had come closer than anyone before him. Issei stared down at his brother, his crimson eyes unreadable. He could end this now. One final strike, and Jin would be nothing more than another corpse on his path to conquest. Yet, for some reason, he hesitated. Athena stepped forward. End him, my king! But Issei didn't move. He gazed at Jean, something unspoken passing through his mind, a memory, a time when they were not enemies. When Jean was not a rebel, but a brother. The thought irritated him. Why did it matter? Yet, as he stood there, he realized something else. Killing Jean would not end the rebellion. It would only turn him into a martyr, and for the first time in his reign, Issei chose a different path. He turned away. Take him! He commanded his soldiers. Break him! But do not kill him! Jean spat blood, his defiance still burning. You think you've won? He snarled. This isn't over. Issei glanced back, his smirk returning. No, brother. It's only just beginning. As Jean was dragged away, the battlefield stood silent. Neither victory nor defeat, only a game that had taken a new turn. And in that silence, Issei knew. The war was far from over. The air was thick with tension as Issei stood in the heart of his war-torn empire. His crimson eyes, once filled with burning wrath, now had an eerie calm about them. He was surrounded by the shattered remnants of a once glorious kingdom, battlefields littered with corpses of gods, angels, and mortals alike. His rule had reached its peak, but a storm was brewing in the very core of his reign. Issei's thoughts drifted back to the day his brother, Jean, was captured. It had been a betrayal that shook him to his core. Jean had always been more than just family. He was his equal, his rival, his mirror image, someone who could match Issei in strength and cunning. But that was the problem. Jean had grown too ambitious, too reckless in his pursuit of power. His willingness to lead the rebellion against Issei had been his undoing. Issei had always seen his companions as tools, pieces in his grand design. They served their purpose, nothing more, nothing less. Yet, as he stood before the iron bars that separated him from his imprisoned brother, he couldn't help but feel an uncomfortable stir in his chest. What was it about Jin's betrayal that gnawed at him? Was it the fact that, despite his cold indifference, he had come to rely on Jean more than he'd ever admitted? A soft knock broke his reverie, followed by the heavy creak of the door opening. Athena, his war goddess, entered the room, her expression unreadable. Despite her unwavering loyalty, there was a sense of caution in her eyes, as if even she could sense the shifting tides within Issei. Issei, she began, her voice smooth, Jin's imprisonment has begun to weigh heavily on your empire. Whispers of dissent are spreading, even among your closest allies. Issei turned, his cold gaze locking with hers. I've handled far worse. What does it matter if they whisper? As long as they fear me, they will remain loyal. But even as he said the words, a small part of him doubted their weight. Athena studied him, her gaze penetrating. Is that truly enough? Fear may control them for a time, but it will not bind them forever. You've pushed them to their limits, Issei. They will break, eventually. Issei smirked, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Let them break. I'll remake them. The broken pieces will serve me better than the whole. Athena remained silent, a subtle shift in her stance betraying her thoughts. She had seen the cracks in his resolve, the softening of his heart towards those he once saw as mere tools. It was a dangerous change, one that could either solidify his rule or destroy him. But she said nothing, simply bowing her head. As you wish, my king. Days passed, and the tension within Issei's ranks only grew. Rumors of Jin's escape began to circulate, despite the best efforts of Issei's forces to suppress them. It was only a matter of time before his brother would return. And when that day came, Issei knew it would not be a simple confrontation. The rebellion was no longer an inconvenience to be crushed. It was a growing force, and Jean was their leader. Issei stood in the grand hall of his citadel, his gaze fixed on the map before him. The empire he had built from blood and destruction was crumbling from within. But he would not allow it to fall. He couldn't. His hands clenched into fists, his crimson eyes burning with the fire of his rage. His kingdom would survive. His vision would become reality. Issei. The familiar voice cut through his thoughts, and he turned to see Athena standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, but there was a look of determination in her eyes. It's time, she said simply. Without another word, she handed him a blade, an ancient weapon that had once belonged to the gods. The blade was forged in the fires of creation itself, its edge sharper than any mortal weapon. It was a symbol of Issei's rule, a reminder that he was not to be trifled with. But as he took the weapon in his hand, he felt a strange weight upon his chest. Athena's eyes narrowed. "You're hesitating." "I'm not hesitating," Issei snapped, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. He knew what had to be done. He had to face Jean. And when he did, it would be a battle to the death. But a small, nagging thought lingered at the back of his mind. Was this truly what he wanted? As if sensing his inner turmoil, Athena placed a hand on his shoulder. "Issei, if you do this, there is no going back. This isn't just about power or control anymore. It's about who you are, and who you will become." For the first time, Issei's cold demeanor cracked, and he found himself looking into Athena's eyes. There was a flicker of something deeper there, something he couldn't name. She wasn't just his tool anymore, she was something more. He took a deep breath, his expression hardening once more. "It doesn't matter who I become. What matters is the world I will shape. Jin's rebellion is an obstacle, and I will burn it to the ground." Jin's escape came sooner than Issei anticipated. The day the prison walls cracked open, the rebellion surged forward with renewed vigor. It was a symbol of hope for those who had been oppressed, those who had suffered under Issei's cruel reign. But for Issei, it was nothing more than a declaration of war. The battle was brutal, but it was not without its casualties. Jean and his forces tore through Issei's defenses, their resolve fueled by the memory of their fallen comrades, their desire for revenge. The conflict culminated in a violent clash between the brothers, the two men who had once fought side by side, now enemies to the bitter end. "You've made your choice, Issei," Jean sneered, his blade raised. "You could have ruled the world, but you chose this path of destruction. You're a tyrant, a monster." Issei's eyes burned with fury, but there was no hesitation in his movements. He struck with lethal precision, his blade cutting through the air like a thunderclap. "You are weak, Jean," he hissed, "and you've always been weak. That's why you're here in my way." But even as the battle raged, a part of Issei couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Jean had once been everything to him. But now, there was only the cold, unyielding desire to crush all opposition. In the end, it was Jean who fell, not by Issei's blade, but by the hands of his own men. Betrayed by his own rebellion, Jean was left to die in the bloodied streets of his last stand. Issei watched in silence, his heart as cold as ever. But deep down, in the quietest corner of his soul, a single thought echoed. Had he truly won? The echoes of Jin's death still reverberated in the halls of Issei's citadel. His body was now but another casualty in the long, brutal history of Issei's rise to power. The rebellion had faltered, but it wasn't over. A deep, unsettling silence settled over Issei's empire, one that hinted at an inevitable storm brewing beneath the surface. Issei stood on the balcony of his throne room, watching as the last of the rebellion's remnants fled to the shadows. The streets were eerily empty, the grand structures of his empire towering in the distance. The smoke from the past battle still hung in the air, a lingering reminder of the bloodshed and the toll it had taken on both sides. But Issei knew, this was not the end. It was only the beginning of something far darker. A figure approached from behind, interrupting his thoughts. It was Athena, her presence as commanding as ever. Though she had stood by his side through every victory, Issei couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer just the tool he had once viewed her as. The rebellion may have fractured, but the seeds of resistance are not so easily destroyed, Athena said, her voice calm but laced with quiet certainty. Jean may be dead, but his influence lingers. The people still remember what they fought for. Issei turned, his crimson gaze locking with hers. It doesn't matter. I will burn whatever is left of them, until there's nothing left but ash and cinders. Athena met his gaze with an unwavering resolve. But you've changed. I can see it in your eyes. You're not the same man you were before. You don't just want to destroy anymore. You want to control. You want to make the world into something that serves you. She paused, her tone softening. But the tools you use to shape this world, they're beginning to see their own value. They won't follow you forever if you treat them like pawns. Issei's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with anger. He had no patience for sentimentality. And what of it? They'll serve me, or they'll perish. I've never needed anything more than obedience and power. Is that truly all you need? Athena asked, her voice a low murmur. Is that truly all you value? Issei's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, a flicker of something uncertain passed through him. But it was gone as quickly as it came. He shook his head, dismissing the thought. I have no need for your questions, Athena. My rule will not be challenged. This world will bend to my will, or it will burn. The next few weeks were a blur of strategy and devastation. Issei's forces had swept across the remaining pockets of resistance, but something had changed. Despite his overwhelming power, despite the fear that gripped the hearts of his enemies, Issei could feel the tremors of dissent even within his own ranks. Athena's words lingered in his mind as he sat at the head of a war council, his crimson eyes fixed on the map that lay before him. His generals and lieutenants gathered around him, their faces a mixture of reverence and fear. None dared to speak unless spoken to, and yet the atmosphere in the room was thick with a palpable unease. One of his more trusted commanders, a man named Jace, stepped forward, his voice low but firm. My king, there are whispers among the troops. They fear the tide has turned, that your strength, though vast, cannot hold back the inevitable. The rebellion may have fractured, but new leaders are rising from the ashes. Issei's gaze sharpened as he looked at Jace. And you're worried about it? Jace stiffened, but did not back down. I'm merely stating what we all know, my king. You've made many enemies, both within and outside your ranks. Even now, there are those who seek to undermine your rule. Your reign, though powerful, is built on shifting sands. If you do not act decisively, enough, Issei interrupted, his voice like ice. I do not need your counsel. I do not need your pity. What I need is action, and if any of you falter or question me, you'll share the same fate as those who dared to defy me. The room fell silent. No one spoke. But Issei could feel it, the faintest crack in the foundation of his empire. His empire, which had once been unshakable, now teetered on the edge of something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. Later that night, Issei stood alone in the throne room, staring out at the burning horizon. His thoughts were turbulent, the storm inside him growing more intense by the day. Athena was right, he could feel it. The loyalty of his allies, those who had once been so eager to follow him, was fraying. He had built his empire with blood and fire, but now, even the fires were beginning to fade. There was no longer the same fire in their eyes, no longer the same hunger to conquer. Was this what true power was? Was this what it meant to be king? He clenched his fists, his mind racing. In the distance, he could see the flicker of rebellion stirring. There were new leaders, new movements, beacons of hope to those who had been crushed under his heel. They were growing stronger, and the people were beginning to rally behind them once more. Jean was dead, but his spirit lived on in these new leaders. And despite everything, Issei could feel something stirring deep within him. He had been right all along, he had to dominate, to crush every last vestige of resistance. But now, as he stood on the precipice of ultimate victory, he realized that perhaps his greatest threat was not the rebellion or the gods, but the growing sense of doubt that plagued him. A knock at the door shattered his thoughts, and Athena entered, her expression neutral. You've felt it too, haven't you? She asked, her voice soft. Issei didn't answer, but the answer was clear in his eyes. He had felt it. The rebellion was not finished. And worse, it was evolving, becoming something more. I'm not afraid, Issei muttered to himself. They will be crushed. I will see to it. Athena stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. You can crush them, Issei. But it won't be the same as before. If you don't recognize that, if you don't change your approach, the rebellion will rise again, and this time, it will be stronger than you. For the first time in his life, Issei felt a doubt. But there was no time to indulge it. He had a kingdom to rule, and a war to finish. The world would bend to his will, or it would be destroyed. The war had dragged on for months, and yet, despite Issei's overwhelming power, a new energy had begun to pulse through the resistance. Whispers of rebellion, stories of defiance, and rumors of gods who had not yet fallen spread like wildfire through the remnants of the old world. Issei's army, once unstoppable, had started to show signs of strain, and it was a fact that weighed heavily on his mind. A new god had risen, someone not from the old pantheon but from the ashes of the rebellion. A man once thought dead, Odin, the Allfather, had somehow returned, resurrected by unknown forces, and with him, an army of the vanquished, the forgotten, and the betrayed. He came with a vengeance, a force unlike any Issei had ever faced. Athena stood by his side as the report came in, the air thick with tension. "It's Odin," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "He's back." Issei stared at the map before him, his crimson eyes cold as ever. "I've already crushed him once. What makes him think he can rise again?" Athena's gaze darkened. "He's not alone anymore. This time, he has the power of those who were once beneath us. The gods, the heroes, the forgotten ones. They're all with him." Issei clenched his fists, his thoughts chaotic but sharp. The walls of his empire were crumbling, not just from the outside, but from within as well. His own allies were no longer as loyal as they once were. The whispers were getting louder. "Let them come," Issei spat, his tone dripping with venom. "We'll finish this once and for all." Odin's forces descended upon the capital in a storm of divine energy and rage. His warriors, clad in ancient armor, charged like a wave, crashing against the city's defenses with relentless force. Odin himself, a towering figure wreathed in gold and lightning, led the charge. His eyes were filled with the wrath of the Forsaken, and his voice carried across the battlefield like thunder. "You are not the only one who can wield the power of gods, Issei!" Odin shouted, his voice booming across the heavens. "You may have crushed the old world, but this is where your reign ends. We will reclaim what is ours." Issei stood at the edge of his citadel, his hands crackling with dark energy, a stark contrast to the brilliant light surrounding Odin. His cold smirk never faltered as he surveyed the battlefield. "If it's a god you want, you'll get one," he said, his voice low and venomous. Athena stood beside him, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of the battle. "He's not just here to fight, Issei. He's here to end you. He's not the only one who has rallied others. The gods and the resistance, they'll fight together now." Issei's laugh was dark, filled with contempt. "The gods are obsolete. They've already shown their weakness. And as for the resistance, they will be crushed like every other spark of rebellion that has dared to challenge me." The battle raged for hours, the clash of divine and cursed power shaking the heavens themselves. Issei's energy surged, a dark inferno that devoured the land, turning the battlefield into a twisted wasteland. His forces tore through Odin's warriors, but even they were relentless. The warriors of the old gods were different from the ones Issei had faced before. They fought with a desperation born from years of exile, a desperation that fueled them as much as their divine might. Odin himself, however, was a different challenge. He fought with the strength of ages, his lightning-infused spear striking down anyone who dared approach him. His eyes burned with an ancient fury, and his every move seemed to tear the world asunder. But Issei was no less powerful. His cursed energy enveloped him like a storm, and his every step was a harbinger of destruction. The two gods clashed in the heart of the battlefield, their powers shaking the very foundation of the earth. "You're nothing but a relic, Odin!" Issei roared, his voice filled with fury. "You've been cast aside by the very people you once ruled. Now you're nothing more than a petulant god, clinging to a past that doesn't exist anymore." Odin's laugh was thunderous, filled with centuries of bitterness. "And you, Issei, are nothing more than a child playing at being a king. You've won the battle, but you'll lose the war. The gods will return. This world will be ours again. You speak of the gods, but they have no power left," Issei sneered. "They've lost, just like you. This is my world now." With a scream of fury, Odin hurled his spear at Issei, the divine weapon crackling with the force of 1,000 storms. Issei moved like a shadow, his energy expanding and enveloping the spear before it could reach him. The clash of their powers sent shockwaves through the battlefield, throwing both gods back. But Issei's smirk never faltered. "You're weak, Odin," he spat, stepping forward. "And you will die like the rest of them." With one final surge of power, Issei unleashed a devastating attack, a torrent of cursed energy that consumed the battlefield. Odin screamed in defiance, but the god of thunder was no match for Issei's relentless wrath. His form was consumed by the dark energy, his body disintegrating into nothingness. As Odin fell, the battlefield fell silent. Issei stood at the center, his chest heaving, the victorious ruler of a broken world. His army stood around him, a mixture of reverence and fear in their eyes. But despite his victory, something had shifted within Issei. For the first time in years, a sense of unease lingered at the back of his mind. He had won, but at what cost? Athena's words echoed in his mind once more. The tools you use to shape this world, they're beginning to see their own value. As Odin's body turned to ash in the wind, Issei stared at the remnants of the battlefield. His gaze was distant, lost in thought. It was a victory, yes, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was coming. The rebellion had not been defeated, it had merely evolved, and Issei could feel it. The seeds of a new war were being sown. The dust of battle had barely settled before cracks began to show. Issei stood at the center of his fortress, his crimson eyes scanning the reports that had just come in. The aftermath of the battle with Odin was a hollow victory, a Pyrrhic one at best. Odin was gone, but the seeds of rebellion had taken root more deeply than ever. Athena stood at his side, her gaze cold as she surveyed the damage. She had proven herself in battle, but even she could sense the growing unease that lingered in Issei's presence. Something had shifted in him, and it was something none of them could ignore. Your victory is hollow, Athena said, her voice calm, but the weight of the words was undeniable. Issei's eyes narrowed, his hand gripping the edge of the stone table, his fingers digging into the stone. I've won, Athena. I've crushed the gods who thought themselves above me. This world is mine to command. There is no rebellion left that can stop me. Athena's gaze softened slightly. And yet, you are not unchallenged. There are factions still out there, waiting, watching for a weakness. The rebellion is not dead, only biding its time. Issei's jaw clenched. He had always believed his power was absolute, but the longer the war dragged on, the more he realized that victory didn't come without consequence. His empire was being tested, not just from the outside, but from within. The dark corridors of Issei's fortress were quiet, the only sounds the distant murmurs of his soldiers preparing for the next strike. His trusted allies, his tools, moved like shadows, their loyalty unquestioned, at least, outwardly. Yet, a strange tension lingered in the air, one that even Issei, the conqueror, could not ignore. It wasn't just the rebellion that was a threat, it was the growing dissent within his own ranks. Issei had built his empire through fear and power, but even that wasn't enough to keep the loyalty of everyone around him. There were whispers now, murmurs of dissatisfaction, voices that questioned his leadership. His tools, the ones he had once viewed as nothing more than instruments to wield, were beginning to show cracks in their obedience. Amaterasu, the once immovable sun goddess, was the first to openly question him. She had always been a pillar of strength in his army, but lately, her faith in his vision seemed to waver. Issei, she said, her voice quiet but firm, you've won countless battles. You've destroyed the gods and crushed the rebellion. But what comes next? What do we do when there is nothing left to conquer? Issei's eyes burned with fury at her words, his crimson gaze piercing through her like a blade. I'll shape this world into something worthy of me. A world without weakness, a world where I reign without challenge. There is no end to my conquest. But Amaterasu's eyes were steady, unyielding. You're wrong, she said, her voice like steel. Conquest is not the answer. You cannot rule an empire of broken souls, Issei. You will end up alone. You've pushed everyone around you away, and now they're starting to feel it. Her words hit like a hammer. For a moment, Issei felt something he had never experienced before, a crack in his armor. He had spent so long building his empire, destroying anyone who dared to challenge him, that he had forgotten what it meant to trust, to have true loyalty. In his obsession with power, he had created a kingdom of fear, not loyalty. You think they're loyal to me because they believe in me? Issei sneered, his voice cold. No. They're loyal because they fear me. They serve me because they have no choice. Amaterasu shook her head. You may have created fear, but you've also created resentment. It's only a matter of time before that resentment becomes something much worse. Issei's heart raced as her words echoed in his mind. Resentment. He had never seen it coming, and yet it was there, growing like a poison in the hearts of his most trusted allies. Hours later, as the fortress lay in eerie silence, Issei walked the dark halls, alone. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Something was changing, and he didn't know how to stop it. His mind raced as he reflected on Amaterasu's words, her warning. He could feel it now, an undercurrent of dissatisfaction in his forces. He had always ruled through sheer force, and now that he had crushed his enemies, there was nothing left but the hollow emptiness of victory. He thought about his tools, Athena, Artemis, Amaterasu, and the others, and realized that he had never truly seen them as anything more than that. Tools to be used, nothing more. But now, they were no longer mere tools. They were companions, allies, perhaps even more. And that realization unsettled him more than anything else. Issei, a voice called from the shadows. He turned to see Athena standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. You're thinking about it, aren't you? Thinking about what? Issei asked, his voice sharp. About what comes next, Athena replied, stepping forward. You've defeated the gods. You've crushed the rebellion. But there's no more war to fight. No more enemies to destroy. You've built an empire, but it's hollow. It's built on power and fear, not loyalty or respect. Issei's gaze hardened. I don't need loyalty. I don't need respect. I need power. That's all that matters. Athena's gaze softened. Issei, you've already lost more than you realize. The ones who follow you, they're starting to see the cracks. They're starting to feel what you've been avoiding all along. You're no longer just the king of a shattered world. You're the king of a broken empire. Issei took a deep breath, his mind swirling. Could Athena be right? Had his obsession with power truly led him down this path? Had he unknowingly turned his empire into a hollow shell? For the first time, doubts crept into his mind. Doubts he couldn't silence. The tension in the air was palpable, as though the very atmosphere was holding its breath. Issei's fortress, once a symbol of his unrivaled power, now felt like a ticking time bomb, one that could erupt at any moment. His empire had crumbled from within, fractured by the cracks in his own leadership, the discontent of his closest allies, and the growing rebellion that had refused to die. Issei stood in his war room, the walls lined with dark banners, and his crimson eyes flickered over the reports. His empire was under siege, not just from the remnants of the rebellion, but from within. His once loyal tools were now the source of his greatest threat. Every step forward felt like a step closer to the edge of the abyss. Athena stood by his side, her arms crossed as she observed the chaos unfolding. She, too, had changed. There was no longer a trace of the unwavering loyalty she had once shown him. Her resolve was still strong, but she had begun to question the very foundation of his rule. You can feel it, can't you? Athena said softly, her gaze shifting to the distant horizon, where the rebellion's forces were gathering for what would undoubtedly be the final confrontation. Issei nodded, his lips curling into a faint, bitter smile. I can feel it. The endgame is upon us. It's strange, isn't it? For all my power, for all the destruction I've caused, there's no longer any thrill. It's like I've already won, and yet I've lost. Athena's eyes lingered on him. You've built an empire on fear, Issei. Fear doesn't sustain loyalty, it breeds resentment. That's what you've failed to understand. You've pushed everyone away, and now the rebellion is your consequence. A deep silence fell between them. Issei's eyes darkened. His grip tightened on the edge of the table. You think I don't know that? You think I don't realize what I've done? Athena stepped forward, her voice steady and calm. You're not the only one who has paid the price for this war. We all have. But it's not too late to change, Issei. You can still save what you've built, but it won't happen if you keep going down this path of destruction. Issei's heart twisted, something foreign stirring inside him. It wasn't regret. It wasn't weakness. It was something else. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in so long. I've never been about saving anyone, Issei said, his voice cold, but the words no longer felt as certain. I've never cared about loyalty or compassion. I've only cared about power. And yet here we are, Athena replied. On the brink of losing everything, including that power. The rumble of approaching forces reached them as they stood in the war room. The rebellion, led by Jean and a new wave of rising leaders, had united their fractured factions for the final stand. What remained of the gods, demons, and angels had rallied under Jin's banner. The armies of both sides were poised for a battle that would determine the future of this world. Issei glanced at Athena. You think they'll defeat me? Athena shook her head. I don't know. But I do know one thing, Issei. This won't end with your victory if you keep pushing everyone away. You have the power to crush them, but you're losing what made you strong in the first place. Issei stood motionless, his mind swirling. He had crushed gods, obliterated entire factions, but now, with everything at stake, the bitter truth hit him. The war wasn't just about defeating the rebellion. It was about something much darker. The truth of his own empire. The truth of who he had become. He had used his tools as pawns, but they were no longer just that. They were more than just tools. They had become something else. He had started to view them as servants, companions, loyal in a way he hadn't fully realized until now. A flicker of hesitation crossed his mind. He turned sharply to Athena, his voice low and tense. You think I can still fix this? You think I can stop this madness? Athena didn't answer immediately. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the internal struggle that he had been ignoring for so long. No one can undo what's been done, Issei, but you can decide what happens next. Do you want to end it all, or do you want to build something beyond fear and destruction? Issei stared at her for a long time. The weight of her words pressed on him like a vice, but he refused to show any weakness. I don't know anymore, he admitted, his voice quieter than he would have liked. As the battle raged on outside, Issei found himself standing at the precipice of his own empire, watching his forces clash against Jin's rebellion. He could feel the weight of his choices pressing down on him, the reality of what had become of his once glorious conquest. Jin, his brother, stood at the front of the rebellion. It was a strange irony. Jin had always been the more compassionate one, the one who had cared about others. Now, he was the one leading the charge to dethrone Issei, to end the rule he had fought so hard to establish. Jin's forces were relentless, but Issei's were equally formidable. The battle between them wasn't just one of physical strength, it was a battle of ideologies, a clash of two brothers who had once shared the same dreams but now stood on opposite sides of the battlefield. You still think you can win this, Jin? Issei's voice cut through the chaos, carrying across the battlefield. Jin, his face hardened but resolute, met his gaze. I don't need to win, Issei. I just need to make sure this world is free of your reign. The words stung more than Issei expected. Jin's righteousness had always been his weakness, and now it was his strength. Was it too late for Issei to change? Was there still a place for him to be more than just the tyrant he had become? But there was no time to dwell on that now. The battle reached its peak, and Issei knew that the outcome would determine everything. Would he continue to be the unyielding king, or would he finally confront the very things he had built this empire to destroy? The sky above the battlefield was darkened by storm clouds, swirling as if the very heavens themselves were mourning the bloodshed below. Issei stood at the center of it all, his crimson eyes reflecting the chaos of the final battle that had raged for hours. His armor, once gleaming with the divine glow of his power, was now marked with the blood of his enemies. Around him, the remnants of the rebellion lay broken, their resistance shattered like fragile glass. Jin, his brother, had fallen. Not with honor, but with a scream of defiance as Issei's overwhelming force crushed him beneath a tide of dark energy. The final battle had been the culmination of years of warfare, a brutal struggle that saw gods, demons, and mortals alike crushed beneath Issei's ambition. Now, with the rebellion scattered and its leaders slain, the world lay at his feet. A deep, satisfied grin spread across Issei's face as he surveyed the aftermath. His enemies were nothing more than dust, their once glorious banners torn and trampled. The gods who had once dared to challenge him now lay broken in the ruins, their divine power nothing more than a fading memory. The angels, the devils, even the most ancient and revered beings, none had stood a chance against him. He had eradicated them all, burned their temples, shattered their armies. Issei. Athena's voice broke the silence. She approached him, her steps slow, but resolute. The war goddess, once his enemy, now stood by his side. She had proven her loyalty in the final moments, helping him to strike down the last of his foes. You've done it, she said, her gaze heavy with respect and something more, something darker. The world is yours. But what now? Issei's smirk deepened as he turned his gaze back to the destruction. Now? He chuckled darkly. Now I reshape it. I'll mold this world in my image, Athena. A world where power is absolute, where only the strong survive. No more factions. No more gods. Just me. His voice was cold, unfeeling, as if he had already discarded the remnants of compassion. The world had been nothing but a plaything to him, a stage for his ascension to absolute power, and now, with his enemies destroyed, there would be no more obstacles. There would be no more rebellion. Issei would reign supreme. Jean had been a symbol of hope for the rebellion. His death marked the final blow to the last resistance. The remnants of his army scattered, their leaders dead, their wills broken. The new world order was one that Issei alone would shape, and he made no attempt to hide the fact that under his rule, nothing would be left to chance. The survivors of the rebellion, those few who had been spared or captured, now stood as prisoners before him. Athena, Amaterasu, and the others, who had once been nothing more than tools in his eyes, now stood as his vassals, forced to bow before him. Each of them had sworn allegiance to him, but it was more than just obedience. It was fear, respect, and awe. I've seen what happens when weaklings and traitors try to defy me, Issei said to them, his tone cold and threatening. You are lucky to still be alive, but that is your only mercy. From this point on, you are not my allies, you are my subordinates. You exist only to serve me. Amaterasu, once a goddess of light, now wore a collar of submission around her neck. Her once proud gaze was lowered to the ground as she silently acknowledged her new place in the world. She knew Issei was no longer the boy she had once trusted. He was a tyrant, a god-king in the making. The others stood in silent submission, their eyes filled with reluctant acceptance. They had no choice but to obey. To defy Issei now would be suicide, and they all knew it. Days turned into weeks, and Issei's empire solidified. His forces, now united under his rule, spread across the realms, quashing any remaining pockets of rebellion with ruthless efficiency. The gods who had once ruled over heaven and earth were either dead or enslaved, their powers stripped away. The devils, angels, and all who had once challenged him were either slaughtered or forced to serve him. Issei was unstoppable. His power continued to grow, fueled by his unyielding ambition and the souls of those he had destroyed. His empire expanded, swallowing everything in its path. Nations crumbled, their rulers bent to his will. He became not just a god but the only god. His word was law. His power was absolute. Months passed, and the world that had once known freedom was now a kingdom of shadows. Issei's rule was a reign of terror, but it was also a reign of stability, for those who served him. The people of the world lived in fear, but they lived nonetheless. Their lives were shaped by his will, and even in the darkest corners of the empire, there were whispers of his name. The Emperor of Darkness, they called him in secret. And so Issei's empire grew, unchallenged, unstoppable. The world was no longer a place of conflicting ideals, nor of balance between light and dark. It was a world where only power mattered, and Issei was the ultimate embodiment of that power. As Issei sat on his throne, surveying the bowing figures of his most loyal servants, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. His eyes, once filled with doubt and longing, were now cold and calculating. He had ascended, and now, there was no going back. He had reshaped the world to fit his vision, and all who lived within it had been made to bend to his will. Athena, Artemis, and the others stood silently at his side, their loyalty unwavering, though each carried the weight of the decisions they had made. They were no longer his tools, they were his companions, his trusted servants. They would carry out his will and ensure his reign would never end. The world, now ruled by Issei's iron fist, would never again know peace. He had crushed all those who had dared oppose him. His victory had come at a great cost, but in the end, it was worth it. The world would burn under his rule, but it would be his world, shaped by his hand, and it would endure for as long as he chose. Issei, the Emperor of Darkness, the ruler of all, had achieved what no god before him had ever done. He had become a god himself. The sun was a distant memory now, hidden behind the ever-present clouds that blanketed Issei's empire. The world beneath was nothing more than a smoldering ash of its former self, cities now nothing more than twisted ruins. The sounds of life were muted, drowned beneath the weight of Issei's power. Under his reign, everything had been remade in his image. A perfect, cold reflection of his vision. From his obsidian throne, Issei surveyed the world he had built. His crimson eyes burned with unshakable conviction, the weight of centuries' worth of destruction on his shoulders. And yet, there was no satisfaction in his gaze, no pleasure in the devastation he had wrought. His ambition had been realized, but now, in the endless silence that followed, he felt empty. He didn't need to look up as the doors to the throne room opened, the air thick with the power of those who entered. Athena, Artemis, Amaterasu, his loyal servants, his companions, now stood in a line before him, awaiting his command. The same servants who had once been nothing more than tools for his war were now more than that. They were the only ones who understood his unyielding need for control, his obsession with power. Each had been broken in their own way, twisted by his vision, and now they were the only ones who truly shared his belief. Issei. Athena's voice echoed through the stillness. Her eyes, once defiant, were now calm, almost accepting, but there was still a hint of something more. She had followed him through it all, her resolve unwavering. You've done it, Artemis added, her voice softer than Athena's, but no less serious. The rebellion is dead. The gods have fallen. And now the world is yours. Issei's lips curved into a smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze shifted to the shattered remnants of a once proud world. This was the price of his victory. A hollow one, and yet, the weight of it all had become too much for him to ignore. Yes, he said, his voice cold and commanding. I've taken everything. But now, I see nothing. I am surrounded by power, yet I feel it slipping away. This world, my empire, has become nothing but ashes in the wind. Athena, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. What do you mean? You have everything. You've built this from the ground up. You've crushed all who opposed you. The world is yours to command. We are yours to command. I know that. Issei muttered, the bitterness evident in his tone. But even with all of it, what does it mean? The rebellion is gone, the gods have fallen, and yet, I'm still alone in all of this. Amaterasu, who had once been the goddess of the sun, now stood beneath the shadow of Issei, her eyes weary but loyal. You're not alone, Issei. We are here. We always have been. We will stand by your side. You have us. Issei stared at her, and for a fleeting moment, something almost human flickered in his gaze. The raw, unyielding ambition that had driven him for so long faltered. His eyes shifted to Athena, Artemis, and Amaterasu, his companions, his trusted lieutenants. They had become more than just tools, more than just servants. They had become a strange, twisted family of sorts, bound by their loyalty to him and to each other. But was that enough? Was it enough to fill the void that had been left in him by the endless pursuit of power? The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of Issei's thoughts pressing down on him. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke again. I'm tired, Athena. Tired of fighting, tired of ruling. Tired of being the king of a broken world. I've built all this, and yet I feel nothing. Nothing but emptiness. Athena's gaze softened, her voice gentle but firm. Then perhaps, Issei, you need something more than just power. Perhaps you need purpose. We've always fought for something, but now, in this world, we have nothing left to fight for. Then what? Issei asked, his voice edged with frustration. What is there left? There's always something, Issei. You've won. But now, the real challenge begins. The world may be broken, but it's not beyond repair. You can choose what comes next. You can build something beyond just power. You can choose to rule not as a god, but as something more. Issei's gaze turned inward as Athena's words echoed in his mind. Could it be true? Had he truly won, or had he simply reached the end of a long, torturous path? Could there be something more than the endless cycle of destruction? Something beyond mere control and power? He looked at his companions, the ones who had stood by him, fought beside him, and sacrificed everything for his cause. A spark of something faint, fragile, ignited in his chest. Perhaps you're right, he whispered, the words tentative, as if he were testing them on his own tongue. Maybe I've been too focused on the wrong things all along. His voice grew firmer as he spoke again. I've taken everything from this world, yes. But it's not enough. I'll rebuild it. I'll rebuild it in my image, but this time, I won't just rule with power. I'll rule with something more. A new purpose. A new vision. The others watched him in silence, the weight of his words settling into their hearts. They had followed him through blood and death. They had stood by him when all hope seemed lost. And now, they would follow him again, as he sought to rebuild the world, not as a god, but as something more. The throne room, once filled with the echoes of Issei's conquests, was now filled with a quiet resolve. The war was over, the rebellion crushed. But the true battle, one that would shape the future of the world, had just begun. Issei was no longer just the Emperor of Darkness. He was something greater, something more than the sum of his past. He was the ruler of a new age, a new world, forged in the fire of his own transformation. And as he looked at his companions, he knew one thing for sure: this was just the beginning. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Aknegas for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.